Good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Wednesday, August 7 hearing of the Evanston Plan Commission. The first order of business is to declare a quorum.
All right. Commissioner Draper? Commissioner Dubin? Here. Commissioner Goddard? Here. Commissioner Halleck? Commissioner Isaac?
Here.
Commissioner Pagotzi? Commissioner Sloss? Here. And Chair Lewis?
Here.
Do you have a quorum?
All right. We have a quorum and we shall begin the meeting. The next item is approval of the minutes of July 24th, 2019. Are there any comments, revisions to that document? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Isaac, seconded. Goddard. All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Please note that Chair Lewis abstains. All right. All right. A few words about the process that we're going to go through tonight. We have two items on the agenda. First is a plan development at 1215 Church Street, and the second is a text amendment to the U2 district. The process will be the same for both. We will start by staff presenting the case in an outline form, and then the petitioner will present their case. Next, there'll be an opportunity for the public, you, to ask questions. Now, this is strictly ask questions about the evidence presented. This is not a time for making comment. You will have that opportunity later. So after that, then you will have your opportunity to speak and let your opinion be known. You'll have an opportunity to speak for 2 minutes. If you're the official representative of a recognized institution, you will have 6 minutes to present. In that time period, if you agree with someone else, there's a lot of people here and we'll be here all night. If you're just reiterating the case that's been made by someone else, you're welcome to come up and say, I agree with so-and-so, and try to please keep it short. It's nice to hear that you reaffirm that, but in the interest of keeping things going, we'd appreciate that. The process will be that we will read in the order submitted on the sign-in sheet. So if you're going to speak tonight, you have to have signed in. I will call you in the order presented. You must come to the microphone to speak and state your name and address for the record, please. All right. After that, we'll close the public hearing and give the commissioners a chance to ask questions and to deliberate, and then take action on the matter. Is there anything I've missed other than swearing everyone in? Anyone? Okay. So if you're going to speak tonight, I would like you to raise your right hand and promise to tell the truth. Do you promise to tell the truth? All right. Very good. Thank you. All right.
Mr. Lewis, there's not a sign-in sheet. When we got here, there wasn't a sign-in sheet.
Because the meeting had started, why don't you please come up and sign it?
I'm sorry, we must have missed the sign-in.
Oh, okay. Okay. That's fine. All right. I believe that's it. So the first item on the agenda is a plan development at 1215 Church Street, number 19 PLND 0069. I believe Mr. Mangum will be presenting. Please.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Plan Commissioners, members of the public. This item is a requested plan development and special use for a project at 1215 Church Street. The applicant is the YWCA. I will give a brief summary of the project and some of the development allowances, site development allowances that are being requested for the project, and then the applicant will follow up with a presentation of their project. Following that, it will obviously be available for questions as well. So the proposal on the south portion of the property is to demolish the existing domestic violence shelter, which is a building that's attached to the central aquatics and activity building within the site that was originally a single-family structure, and replace that by constructing a two-story entrance with a second-story connection across the central portion of the site to the northern building addition that's proposed. Additional improvements on the southern portion of the site include improvements to the parking lot with additional parking spaces, landscaping, a drop-off area, and improved vehicular circulation. On the northern portion of the site, the proposal is to construct a new four-story domestic violence shelter that would be attached to the central building on the campus, to demolish an existing building that's being temporarily used for offices at the northern end of the property and was also formerly a single-family residence, and then to construct a new parking lot at the north end of the site for the domestic violence shelter. So a special use is required, and an existing special use is existing for the community center and recreation center. Due to the expansion, a new special use request is before you. Here's a site plan showing the proposed new site plan. And then a summary of the site development allowances that are requested. There are 5 site development allowances that are requested for parking location within the front yard setback that's on Church Street, for a loading berth location that's within the west interior side yard setback, for impervious coverage of about 75%, where 55% is allowed, a building height of 4 stories and 42.4 feet for the shelter addition, where 35 feet is allowed within the R4 district, and an additional 12 feet is allowed as a site development allowance. And for an unenclosed loading berth that's within the side yard and front yard. After Plan Commission deliberation, the following standards will be considered by the commissioners in making a recommendation on this item to the City Council. These are the standards for special uses, standards for plan developments, and standards and guidelines for plan development specifically within the R4 General Residential District. We'll go through these slides in detail later on in the meeting. And finally, staff is recommending approval. So it recommends that the Plan Commission make a positive recommendation to the City Council for the approval of the plan development and special uses with the following conditions. One, that the applicant continue to work on the aesthetic design of the building additions, that the applicant agree to a construction management plan, and that the plan development be in substantial conformity to the documents and testimony on record. That concludes a summary of the staff presentation. We're available for questions later on. Thank you.
All right, now it's time for the petitioner to present.
Good evening. Chairman Lewis, members of the commission, my name is Steve Bauer. I'm an attorney with Meltzer, Pertel, and Stell. Here this evening on behalf of the YWCA of Evanston North Shore as the beneficial owner of the property that's displayed on the overhead screen, located at 1215 Church Street and 1726 and 1730 Ridge Avenue. That property, as you can see from the aerial photo, is generally located at the northwest corner of Church Street and Ridge. I'm joined by various direct and indirect YWCA representatives this evening. Most namely, they are Shabnam Sangvi as co-chair of the YWCA Board of Directors, Karen Singer as president and CEO of the YWCA, Jim Kastenholz as the project manager with the AT Group, Jack Schroeder of Landon Bowen Baker as the project architect, Chris Hutchinson and Chris Mealy of Terra Engineering as the project traffic engineer and civil engineer, respectively. And then last but not least, Mimi McKay of McKay Landscape Architecture as, not surprisingly, the project landscape architect. We are very pleased to be before you this evening with the approval of the Preservation Commission for a certificate of appropriateness for both the proposed demolition and construction activity, as well as recommendations of approval by both staff and DAPR. As Scott just noted, the request before you this evening is for a special use to allow expansion and related redevelopment of the YWCA campus, and secondarily for plan development approval in accordance with the plans and exhibits that have been submitted and included with your meeting packet. And then, of course, there are the associated site development allowances that staff also identified. And so I don't want to spend a lot of time on those. Happy to discuss them to whatever extent you desire, but just quickly again, they pertain to parking within the required front yard, parking within the west side yard, increased impervious surface, increased building height, and open loading zone. The reason I wanted to mention those quickly is because it's important to note that all but one of those allowances is actually a product of existing site conditions. So this is a redevelopment or partial redevelopment of the site, and as a result there are certain improvements that are proposed to remain and certain improvements that are proposed to be removed. The primary building that you see on the site, is there a pointer? There's like a light here, I think, or something. Oh, is this it? Well, regardless, I'll just try to describe to the best of my ability. So looking at the three lots that are reflected in the red boundary on the aerial photo here, the southernmost largest lot contains the majority of the site improvements that function as the YWCA facilities. In fact, that lot is actually the original lot established or owned and established by the YWCA since 1969. It's kind of difficult to describe without a laser pointer, but the bulk of the improvements, building-related improvements on that site, again, I'm speaking only to the southernmost lot, the largest lot, contain the existing administration and pool facilities. That building in its entirety is proposed to remain. The only building that is proposed to be demolished on that lot is directly south of that, which is a former single-family structure that most immediately before the YWCA's occupancy of that building served as a nursing home. So that building is proposed to be demolished, but again, the larger, much larger building to the north in terms of overall site footprint is proposed to remain. Needless to say, that obviously presents significant site constraints with respect to placement of proposed improvements, namely parking lot improvements that are proposed to be reconfigured and modified on the southern portion of the site, which basically would expand them beyond the existing location of that southern parking field and include the footprint or part of the existing footprint of that existing domestic violence shelter building, which is the former single-family residence that I mentioned earlier. So the only site development allowance that is not directly tied to site constraints is building height. And it's important to note that the building height allowance that's sought actually will result in a building height that is several feet below the existing building height already established on the site. And what I mean by that is, again, looking at that larger building that I referenced on the southernmost lot, if you look at the westernmost building, which is kind of shown in the darker brown color, That is a building or portion of the existing pool and administration building that is actually taller than the proposed 4-story domestic violence shelter and community center building that's proposed to be located on the northern portion of the site, which would be specifically located on the middle lot directly north of the existing building that I just described in significant detail. I think with that, before proceeding further, I'd like to introduce both Shabnam and Karen to provide you with some background regarding the YWCA and some insight as to the redevelopment proposal that's before you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Good evening. As Steve said, my name is Shabnam Sangvi. I've been an Evanston resident for the past 20 years, and my husband and I have had the privilege to raise our 3 daughters in this community. Throughout my time here, I've been an active community member, and currently I serve as the vice chair of the board of directors of the YWCA Evanston North Shore. It's my pleasure and my honor to be before you this evening. I'd like to talk about the value that the YWCA adds to the quality of life in Evanston, and I'd also like to share the unanimous, enthusiastic commitment of our board of directors to this important project, a project which we believe will support the growth of our impact for decades to come. The YWCA Evanston North Shore started here in 1931. Over the past 88 years, we've grown to an organization which impacts over 20,000 lives per year. We support the health, safety, and economic advancement of women, girls, and families, and we work towards racial and gender equity. Our work is done through a combination of direct services, training, and advocacy. We serve over 800 community members yearly in our comprehensive domestic violence programs, providing emergency shelter, long-term housing, counseling, and legal advocacy. Additionally, we serve over 2,000 students in the District 65 and District 202 to provide education and healthy relationship training. We offer financial education as well as employment and housing support to help women and families achieve economic stability. Our Equity Institute touches thousands of community members each year through education and advocacy work, and our first-rate aquatics program provides accessible and affordable water safety instruction to over 2,000 youth annually. Throughout all of our work, the YWCA reflects that broader commitment which Evanstonians like myself share for eliminating racism and empowering women. Finally, I would like to emphasize that our board is committed to our long-standing and deep roots here in Evanston. We believe that the essential mission, the critical education and services that we bring, deserve a facility which reflects the value of the work being done and respects the dignity of those who access our programs and services. All of this without any negative impact to neighboring property owners. As such, we want to create a space that will be an anchor for our growing work for the betterment of society, and a place which truly engages others in making a community where we all can thrive. Thank you for your time and your consideration. It is now my pleasure to introduce our CEO, Karen Singer, so she can provide some background and insight regarding the redevelopment project being presented this evening.
Thank you, Shabnam. Good evening, everyone. I am, as Shabnam says, Karen Singer, and I have been the CEO of YWCA Evanston North Shore for 15 years. It has been my privilege, and I'm very, very grateful to be here tonight. I thought perhaps explaining a little bit about how we got to this moment in time might help, because it has been an extraordinary journey. Since 1931, the YW has been providing programs and services to support women and girls and families so they have the resources, the skills, and the opportunities to live up to their full potential. And since that time, as the needs of the community have grown and changed, the YWCA has risen to the challenge of deepening its commitment and ability to meet those needs. After almost 4 decades of moving YWCA's facilities throughout various locations in Evanston to accommodate our growth, in the mid-60s, we purchased the former nursing home property at the corner of Ridge and Church, where we have remained to this day. In doing so, we continued to provide safe and affordable housing to women and quickly expanded the site and the facilities by building an aquatic center and program space to support women, families, and youth in our community in furtherance of our mission. And we have done this at the same site and with the same facilities for 50 years, keeping thousands of women and children safe, supporting their health and well-being, and ensuring they have access to the skills and resources they need to thrive. So our original facility has served us well. But in the past decade, we have grown exponentially. We have launched or expanded 14 new impact areas to better serve our community. Our budget has increased 113%. Our staff has grown 70%. And we serve almost 40% more women, families, and community members through our education and training programs to achieve racial equity, end violence against women, and help women achieve financial economic security. And yet our physical footprint is the exact same as it was 50 years ago. We are simply out of space and can no longer provide the quality of programs and services our community needs and deserves. So as a result, our board undertook a very thoughtful and very intentional assessment over the last 2.5 years to evaluate whether or not to stay in Evanston or to leave. We did not take that lightly. We looked at many factors and talked to dozens of community members and partners, and even conducted a formal feasibility study laying out several different scenarios. The conclusion was resounding. Stay in Evanston, deepen our long-standing history and legacy here, renovate our campus to expand our ability to meet our mission and the needs of our community. So it is clear to us that in order to do more and be more for our community, we must renovate and expand the campus to move into our future and continue our mission for the benefit of the community. And that is what has brought us to this moment in time. The project has 3 basic components: to build a trauma-informed family support center that will enhance our services to women and children, doubling our shelter capacity. I should note that we turn away 1,000 women and children every year from our domestic violence shelter due to shelter constraints and limited capacity, and expand our community-based services for women and families. 2, to renovate our current facility, to accelerate our role as a leader in advancing racial and gender equity by providing more education and training rooms for our expanded financial education and job training workshops, housing assistance, and equity trainings. And 3, to upgrade our aquatics center to maintain a first-rate aquatics facility, teaching all youth in our community how to swim. We are committed to remaining a vital and essential institution and resource for our community, supporting children, women, and families so they can live up to their fullest potential. And in the end, making Evanston a stronger, more equitable, and stable community. Thank you.
Scott, can I ask you to go to the next slide, please? So there are 6 general elements of the proposed special use and plan development request. The exhibit that's presented before you now is the proposed redevelopment plan. Those 6 general elements entail demolition of the existing obsolete domestic violence center building, shelter building, which is, thank you, Scott, located where the mouse pointer is indicating. And as I indicated before, and as you can now see, the footprint of that existing building, which is faintly reflected, by the way, with dashed lines there, will then be consumed or replaced by parking expansion, including a circulation drive for pickup and drop-off, and then a southern addition to the existing pool and administration building for the purpose of creating a forward-facing or street-facing entryway to the facility, which frankly is quite important because that hasn't existed since that building was constructed. If you're familiar with the facility, the main entrance is actually on the west side, exactly opposite the street visibility. Second is the construction of a two-story entryway on the south building elevation, which is what I just described, and we have some renderings of that to help you understand more specifically what is contemplated. I think you also have building elevations in your packet. Third is construction of a 4-story domestic violence shelter and community center building, which is shown on the north side of the site, where indicated by the mouse pointer. Fifth is expansion and reconfiguration of that south parking field, as I sort of referenced earlier, for purposes of adding additional parking and affording improved site circulation. I should note that the addition of parking is quite important because while what is proposed is in excess of what is required by code, the YW frequently encounters a parking supply shortage as a result of the high level of attendance for its programs. And then last but not least is the construction of the new north parking field, immediately north of the new domestic violence shelter building and community center, which is intended to primarily serve occupants of the shelter with some limited use by administrative staff. As I said, we're very pleased to have received the support from both DAPR and staff that we've encountered thus far. As you, I'm sure, are well aware from your review of the staff report finds that the YWCA has satisfied all of the applicable standards of review. So for that reason, I'm not intending to go through them, although I'm happy to do so if you prefer. I can otherwise address any questions you may have. That said, to help you better understand the project in light of the specific considerations associated with those standards of review, I'd like to introduce Jack Schroeder as the project architect, who can briefly walk you through the proposed improvements. Thank you.
Hi, Commissioners, thank you for your time. I'm really going to struggle without the pointer, so it's kind of a way of talking. And I apologize, there may be some overlap with these great introductions that have already happened, but I'll try to kind of quickly move through and kind of let you understand what's going to be happening in the new building and the existing building. So first, our mandate and goals were to expand and optimize the domestic violence housing and supportive service programs, to grow and improve the staff space and supportive service space, to expand the ability to have public and educational events for the organization, improve aquatics for both patrons and staff, and then provide a new face and outward impression of the Y to the larger community. Starting in the south lot, we've reconfigured the parking to respond to the overlapping uses and drop-off and different populations that are using the building at different times. We've introduced more green space into the parking lot, and the existing curb cut remains on that side. We're expanding the stormwater retention to meet city requirements. We're preserving large, thriving trees, and we're adding 20-plus trees to that portion of the site. And we're also creating a large plaza with exterior seating and just a place for people to mix when they're not inside the facility. At the north lot, this parking space is mostly dedicated to the DV center and shelter. We've expanded an existing curb cut to allow for that. We've been working with staff and our traffic engineer to figure out how exactly to address Ridge, and we think we've come to a pretty good conclusion with a right-in, right-out solution. We've landscaped the edge between our parking and neighbors, again, met stormwater retention requirements. We've introduced garden plots, a patio outside of the pool for stretching and just expansion off the pool deck when weather allows. A staff patio to the north there for lunches, impromptu meetings. And then in the rear is a really great meditative garden and play space for the families that'll reside in the building. Go flip one. Really quickly run through the plans. In the basement, we will be rehabbing the existing men's locker room and adding 2 family and gender-neutral changing spaces and bathrooms. At the first floor, to the south, see, this is where my pointer is necessary. We've kind of created a new entry space and expanded the lobby to allow for more waiting and mixing again in that space. The pools will remain mostly the same with just some mechanical improvements to improve air quality and some kind of surface paint and those sort of improvements. The staff space is drastically improved. We're able to introduce more privacy between patrons and staff and patrons of different ages, and we've just really freed up those facilities. We are renovating the existing women's locker room. Now family residential entry is isolated from other functions. Currently those things overlap in a way that can lead to some kind of intense situations. And now we've isolated those 2 for both safety, security, and just peace within the environment. At the second floor, this is where you start to see that bridge piece that links from the new entry over to the new 4-story portion of the building. At that level, you see the admin space that Karen had mentioned had expanded, to a pretty great degree, and this gives them some open office space, shared office space, a lounge space, and it just improves all of the kind of day-to-day services in the building. Those spaces currently are disconnected. They're in 3 or 4 different spots in the building, and we're really kind of bringing everybody together. In the existing 3-story building, you see 2 classrooms and some more open offices for an institute. And then what we're calling the boardroom space is up above that existing, or that new entry piece to the south there. Third floor, you see 3 more classrooms that can be expanded into an even larger kind of community meeting space or for large events that the Y hosts. This is where you start to see the residences on the north side there. At this floor, we have 13 residence spaces. They're configured so that a number of those units could be combined depending on the family structure that enters the program at that time. And there's a shared lounge space and laundry at that level. And then up to the 4th floor, we're just left with the residential portion, and this is 10 residences and the shared kitchen and dining space that is up there at the 4th floor, and a shared play area for younger residents. Going forward, I think if we can go to, these are some of the building elevations. I think the renderings may be easier just to speak to directly. So this is the new entry piece to the south. It's a 2-story new entry. The board space is up there on top, so we're really transparent. We're trying to give a new outward face, a ridge and church-facing piece here. We've got planters and benches, bike racks. The mass at the front of the building kind of ramps up again to sort of pull people in. We're picking up a little bit on the modernity of that kind of late 60s, early 70s building that we're attaching to. And then if you go to the next view, you get a sense of the new 4-story portion of the building. We're wide open again at the corner, and this is where we have kind of classroom spaces and shared office spaces. So there's a really outward feel towards Ridge. And then as you get up into the more private spaces of the residences, the building starts to close in a bit. But the main goal was to kind of match the what I think is the energy, spirit of this place, be bright, be inviting, and be a place that's sort of welcoming to people coming out of what could be a pretty traumatic space. And I think that's it. As Scott said, we've agreed to keep working on the exterior. We've heard some comments about materiality, form, and that's one of the caveats of the PD, is that we'll continue to kind of work with staff on that. We've also heard about site lighting from some of the neighbors, and we will be sensitive to that. Currently, it's lit off of walls. We're going to go to more of a downlit design, and we'll be able to show that to the neighbors once we get the photometrics. And some concern about mechanical noise, which again, we're working with an acoustic engineer to guarantee that we'll meet city requirements at lot line. So the work continues, but we're really excited. Thank you for your time.
Scott, can you please go back to the overall site plan? I'm going to speak very quickly in the interest of time, out of respect for the commission and as a courtesy to the next item on the agenda, but I just want to mention a couple of things that are not necessarily readily apparent from a cursory review or a quick glance of the site plan. Relative to the new domestic violence shelter and community center building on the north side of the property, I don't believe Jack specifically referenced this, so I just wanted to make reference to the fact that there has been very thoughtful consideration given to the orientation of that building, the placement on the site, and it is oriented in an east-west fashion, as you see, as opposed to a north-south direction, specifically for the purpose of avoiding a sort of canyon effect along Ridge Avenue, given the height of the buildings to the east of the YWCA campus, and particularly the northeast. Also to the direct west, or like the top of the slide, immediately west of the building that I just described, the four-story proposed new building, is a area that's intentionally devoted for private use for the residents of the domestic violence shelter, which is, as you can imagine, important given the discrete nature of that operation. Again, I think I'll stop in the interest of time. Happy to address any questions you may have. Certainly don't want to be redundant given the extensive and detailed staff report. But just to close quickly, and sort of on the heels of what Jack mentioned, needless to say, we have reviewed the staff report as well as the proposed conditions of approval. We're pleased to have received staff's recommendation of approval relative specifically to condition number 1. As Jack kind of referenced, we're well aware of the fact that there have been some recent concerns or comments raised by area residents relative to building aesthetic. We understand those to really relate to building design elements as opposed to site plan design elements. And for that reason, we're committed to continuing to work with the city and with those residents to evaluate those comments and incorporate and address them into the revised plan to the greatest extent necessary. Just to kind of give a little bit of context to that, there have, by our account, been at least 7 meetings with neighborhood groups, or meaning immediately adjacent property owners at one time, as well as individual one-on-one meetings with certain of those adjacent property owners. So with that, I will stop, afford you an opportunity to ask any questions you may have, and respectfully request your recommendation of approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bauer. All right, before we open it up for public questioning of the petition, I'll open it up to questions from the commissioners. Commissioner Halleck.
I guess this is a question for staff. Given that the public, the neighbors, have made comments about the aesthetics of the building, and the comment was that the group is going to continue to work with staff, what's the process? How are the neighbors satisfied that whatever comes out of these meetings with the staff is going to be, that addresses their concerns?
Yeah, we're planning to work with the Y and their architects in the near term, and then hopefully have some potential discussions and potentially revisions before it would get to the Planning and Development Committee. And so then those plans would be public as part of that packet.
Okay, so then the Plan and Development Committee, is that a public meeting? I'm sorry.
Correct. Yeah, it's a committee of the City Council.
So the neighbors can come and make comments at that point to what is the revised design. whatever comes out.
Yes, yes. And so this is one step in the process. Plan Commission makes a recommendation on to Planning Development Committee that recommends to City Council.
Okay.
And then following, if the plan development were to be approved, following that, the Design and Project Review Committee would also review again before issuing a building permit.
So if I can just tail onto that, so there has been a list that you're keeping of what are concerns, aesthetic concerns from neighbors and people, so you're not, when you're going forward with...
Yes, we've heard several comments at DAPR, Design and Project Review Committee, as well as with the Preservation Commission, as well as staff has been present at least one of the meetings with neighbors.
Okay, all right. Other commissioner questions? Commissioner Isaac.
This is a question for staff. I've noted that the stairwells leading from Ridge Avenue up to the sidewalk are proposed to be removed, and wanted to know what, whether that was a staff request or a proposal by the applicant.
This was a suggestion by staff, and the applicants followed up as a public benefit to remove those. The concern being Ridge Avenue, as we all know, is a very busy roadway, and a mid-block crossing or having people stop on Ridge Avenue to let pedestrians out to the stairs mid-block would not be a safe condition.
Okay. And then second question relates to the orientation of how we're looking at setbacks. It looks like we're using Ridge as the front yard. When the building's basically oriented towards Church.
Yeah, actually, I believe Church was considered to be the front setback.
Okay, I'm looking at this, and it's showing a 27-foot front yard setback on Ridge and a 15-foot side yard setback on Church.
Correct. I think that was in the applicant's plan set. As far as staff's review of the zoning analysis, it was considered as Church Street to be the front yard.
Okay. So the parking that is the additional parking that's being proposed, is going to be within that 27-foot setback on Church.
That's correct.
Okay. No more questions.
Is that it? So I'm going to trail onto that parking. So the front yard, is it not an existing condition that the parking is encroaching on the front yard setback?
There is an existing encroachment. The proposal is to kind of expand on that. So that's where the site development allowance is triggered.
Commissioner Halleck.
What is the dimension from the Ridge, what's the setback on Ridge currently?
I believe that's 27 feet. I could pull that up, but I think this would all...
So if the front yard was on Ridge, I understand that the staff has designated Church as the front yard, but that's because the doorway or the entrance is sort of facing that way. But I think one could argue that the front yard is actually Ridge, and therefore it's set back 27 feet. I just think there could be an argument for that.
Mm-hmm. Therefore, it's in compliance with the parking requirements and the setback requirements regarding parking. Okay. Any other commissioner questions? Commissioner Goddard?
I have a question for the applicant. If there's such a dire need for domestic violence sheltering, why did you limit this access to those to just the third and fourth floor? Why not expand it?
That's an excellent question, and we grappled with that for a long time, how big to expand to. And I think that there is a balance that we were hoping to achieve with the building, and that is still to make it a welcoming environment that is non-institutional in nature and in feel. And we felt if we went bigger, we would lose some of that. It also required a lot more staffing, which would have required a lot more resources. So there was a kind of balance that we were hoping to achieve with all those things.
Okay. So while you're still there, this proposed development meets your needs as you forecast for the board and yourself forecast for
Decades.
decades. Okay, so this is adequate, will function for you. Okay. Commissioner Sloss.
Just a question for the applicants. So how, do you have the distance from the west properties or the northwest property line to the closest adjacent structure? Do you know how close that is? Yeah, to the closest, like the closest adjacent building.
So at that back corner, northwest corner, we're 25 feet still from the property line there. As far as from
Do you know,
other
do you know
buildings,
how far the,
I don't
the
have
other
that
one is?
dimension. I apologize. And then we're even further from, the piece that comes out at an angle is single story, and the 4-story portion comes up that flat wall.
Commissioner Sloss, it appears that the existing building, the rear of that existing building is approximately 60 feet or so from the rear of the closest house on Asbury.
Other commissioner questions? All right, so I have at least a couple. So this is partially within a historic district, as I understand, and the demolition is of the existing residential structure is within that area. And as I understand, you've gotten approvals from the appropriate historic people. So what I am, I'm a little a little wondering how the relationship of the facility fronting that historic district is. So on a factual numerical basis, I see you're actually encroaching less toward the street. Do you know how much further back you are from it? I mean, you're kind of changing the character of the street from having a residential structure facing a residential district to having a more institutional structure. So I'm wondering how that's I guess it's mitigated a little bit by having public space and softness, but you're also coming back some distance further. Is that like, yeah, that's a quantity, and I'm looking for like.
So I guess we'll take this together if that works for you. First and foremost, in response to your comment, Chairman, if you look at page 3 of the staff report, there's a red line that's denoted that sort of bisects the site in an east-west fashion. That is the boundary line that separates what is in the Ridge Historic District from what is not. So if you turn your page counterclockwise so that the site plan is facing north, what is south of that line is in the district. What is north of that line is not.
Understood, yeah.
Okay. So then
I'm asking how far from where you built the entrance to where the existing house was going south.
Understood.
Okay.
And just, I don't have that number with me. Looking at the dashed outline of the existing house here, the main frontage, for example, that double door into the new lobby is 6 feet. It looks like the main frontage is probably 8 feet further to the east. And then there was a bump out in the porch that was an additional 4 or 5 feet.
Yeah.
Can I?
But I'm sorry, I don't have the stats with me.
Well, it looks like it's
is this
significant,
outline
maybe-
here?
maybe
Is that an
four-
outline of
maybe
the
40
existing
feet or
building?
so, right?
All right.
Yeah. So there's the width of the drive, which is 30 feet, 24 feet, which basically coincides with the front of where the house was, plus the plaza distance, right? So it's a significant distance, maybe 40 feet or so. You're actually moving the property back, right? Yes. And you are? Okay, all right, thank you. Okay. Yes. No, okay, all right.
And that's actually one of the points of clarification I wanted to try to make before attempting to answer your question. When you said street, you meant from Church, not from Ridge. Is that correct?
Church, yes.
Okay.
Yes. The residential district, yes. Yeah, okay. All right. Also, I'm wondering what the material palette is for both the entrance facing the historic district and for the residents on the other side.
And currently, what you see there is a metal panel at the south entry piece, this sort of white, this piece here. The bigger building is, as we said before, mostly glazing at those front ends, and the construction it's precast concrete, so it's a white tinted concrete, and then the orange surfaces would be painted. These are the things that we're hearing pushback on, in all honesty. So those are the things we're planning to kind of revisit with Scott and staff.
Okay. Yeah.
But that's where we started, and that's again trying to kind of put out that this is a modern organization, bright, welcoming, and people have different interpretations of those things. So.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? Commissioner Hallett.
Uh-huh.
Sorry. So one of the issues that I have is actually with the site plan, not the building plan, not the how the elements are arranged in the building. I think that's logical. But one thing that keeps bothering me is this where the loading is and the trash, and it's right next to these houses. And I look at the site plan and I don't even understand how a truck could even get into those spaces. But I just wondered, did you look at other locations that weren't as close to the neighbors? And one of the standards that we look at is basically, does the project have a negative impact on the the adjacent properties? And I'm very concerned about this one, as well as a couple of things that you're supposedly going to be working on with DAPR, which is mechanical noise and lighting and those sorts of things. So bundled together, it's kind of a big issue, I think.
So from a standpoint of layout for trash and refuse, we have moved it absolutely all over the site. As you can see, the bulk of the building is where it is, and this kind of confusion about which yard is the front is, I think, partially because we don't really have a backyard. So we've talked about it being in the north lot, and doesn't really make sense from a pull in, pull out from an actual use standpoint for the trash pickup. We were trying to avoid moving it towards Church, towards Ridge, for obvious reasons. The home immediately adjacent, you can see the gray box there. There's not really a great spot to slide it, back and forth along those spots. So, it's not our desire to put it near anyone, but it has to be somewhere. And to be honest, we've shifted that, 4 or 5 times at this point, and partially trying to figure out what a truck can get to with how our site is configured, and also to keep it away from the major streets to whatever degree we can. And I don't, if you have an idea, or, we're open. It's not a hard and fast thing, but go ahead.
Sorry. I just wanted to add quickly, because I think we neglected to mention this. So the site plan that's presented on the screen is actually slightly different from what is included in your meeting packet. And that's as a result of an effort to respond already to some of the comments we've heard from neighbors. If you look at the site plan in your packet, you would see that the trash or refuse enclosure is actually located in the north, well, it's hard to describe, but thank you. The northwesternmost corner of the new, proposed new parking field on the north side of the site. Where it's proposed now, thank you, it is actually where it is existing today. And again, it was proposed to be relocated from that northwestern location reflected on the plan in your packet to the location now shown on this plan in an effort to respond to comments from neighbors. Sorry, comments from the city.
There was some concern with staff that about the garbage trucks pulling in and out off of Ridge down. There's a little bit of a pitch there. It's just not the cleanest entry spot. And as Steve said, it exists there now. There's not really a shelter or housing for it. They're just loose bins kind of at the end of that lot. So we're trying to improve that and work with what we have.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Isaac.
How many more additional trash bins are you anticipating needing?
Well, we haven't worked with waste management on that yet. We are adding residents and some office space. Maybe it's increasing by 50% would be kind of just a loose number in my head. We're not doubling. We're not, yeah.
How many? Do you know how many are existing there today? Okay, thank you.
All right, are we finished? Beautiful. All right, before I open it to questions from the public, there's some noticing that I need to do. So persons or groups with an ownership or leasehold interest in property within, in this case, 1,000 feet of the planned development in each direction have the right to request a continuance for the purpose of disputing evidence that has been presented by the petitioner. That request has to be in writing and stating the purpose, and then would be acted upon by the commission. So if you're contemplating that, you would need to write something and present it to the commission at this point in time. The meeting would be postponed until the next meeting on a date certain. Is that correct? All right. So all right. Moving on. I'm going to open this up to questioning from the public. Now, this again, let me repeat that this is not a time to voice your opinion. It's a time for exploring facts and clarification. And so you will have an opportunity to state your opinions following this. So the first person is Mary McWilliams. Is she here, and would you like to ask questions? All right, fine, thank you. I believe the next is Dave Brannigan. All right. Did I get that right? All right, beautiful, thank you.
My name is Dave Brannigan. I live at 1719 Asbury, which, as stated earlier, is 60 feet from the back of the building, the closest building on Asbury to the Y. We've lived there 24 years. I've been an Evanston resident for 45 years. And I'd like to start, if we can, looking at this plan.
Is this a question? This is just a time for questions. It is not for an explanation.
No, I have questions.
Okay, so this is a question.
The plan that I received the landscape plan,
all right,
which shows a wood fence appearing to extend from Church Street all the way to the north end of the property. We have a brick wall on the south edge of our backyard, and we have a fence that we installed not too many years ago. So my question is the intent to replace the brick wall and our fence? So the plan is wrong?
Yes. Yeah, so why don't we respond, we'll go question by question, but by person, and then respond all at once to your
Okay.
questions, all
Right.
right? So that's question number one, is
Okay.
the intent with the fence?
Question number two, which hadn't come to mind until just a few minutes ago. The trash location appears to have been moved once again to its current location, where for 24 years we've had, I'm sorry, this is getting into comment territory. I'll come back to that.
Yes, yeah. Okay, so you want to know,
I want to know, where's the trash going?
okay, clarified, okay,
I
yeah,
want to know if the trash is going to be once again in our backyard.
okay, all right.
And one more question. We live closest to the property, and I want to know why we have no landscape relief. The trees stop just about at our property line. So we have the same view that we have right now, and we'd like to have some relief on that.
Okay, all right.
I'll be
Very
back.
good. Thank you. So who would like to respond to those? You'll have to come up to the microphone.
As Mimi started to say, I think the intention with the fence is to be only on our property and not interfere with anybody else's fences or walls. And then as far as trees, I think absolutely we can add, some along the rest of that back line.
Okay, I think the third question was there's,
Greens? Sorry. Yeah.
yeah, so I think the third question relates to where the trash enclosure is. One is, look, one location, which I understand is the current location, is at the little elbow where the property line comes in, but I understand that the new proposed location is in the very northwest corner in the resident lot.
And like we said to Commissioner Halleck, this is kind of an ongoing thing, and I apologize that it's moved multiple times, but we're still trying to reach the spot that is accessible, works for the site and the owner. So in my estimation, this is the landing space for
Which
it.
is this?
Yeah, this. Because part of
Okay.
why it moved, again, was the DAPR meeting, which was just last week, and that's part of it too, is we're having preservation, DAPR, your committee, we're kind of working down the line here and trying to sort of shift and move as we go. But-
So for Mr. Brannigan, to be clear, it is still going to be close to his
Correct.
property?
Uh-huh.
All right. Okay. Elizabeth Rack?
My name is Elizabeth Rack. I also live at 1719 Asbury Avenue, and I've been a resident of Evanston for over 30 years. My questions really relate to the fact that this is a planned development, and knowing I'm also an architect, and knowing how planned developments are wonderful opportunities to better the environment. My first question is, how does this site solution really help our rich historic district? And particularly 1 inch away from your property line. My next question is, how does this solution create a campus that has no impact to its surroundings? And if you can answer that specifically, that'd be great. My third question is it possible for us to see renderings along Asbury Avenue as it relates to your building, so we can really see the impact to our neighbors, to our houses, as well as the historic district that's right next door? And more specifically, how does this solution relate to the neighborhood beyond the Ridge Corridor?
Can you run me the...
So this is an opportunity to enrich the historic district, I believe was one. So how does this benefit the historic district, I think is the question.
To be clear where the historic district starts and stops, the one piece of improvement on the site is that main entry. Again, we feel like this is a brand new entry and marker for the Y, and it pulls people into the space and gives a more welcoming entrance than the current one.
Okay.
I would also just quickly add that I'm not sure if you attended the Preservation Commission meeting. Okay, then you obviously know already what I would otherwise tell you, but ultimately, for the benefit of the commission, the Preservation Commission, not to put words in its mouth, but in general, I think concluded that there's been enough change in this portion of the historic district as a result specifically of the property to the immediate south having been a home that was of historic character and having burnt down, thus resulting in the townhome development that exists there today. And then as a result of that development bifurcating the portion of the district to the south of the property to the south of Church from the portion of the district that's north of Church and on the YWCA property.
All right.
And then you said construction?
No impact on the, I'm sorry, how to,
I mean, going back to my presentation, I would say the improvement to the green space in the parking, all these new trees, garden space, meditative space, play space, stormwater retention, new buildings, increased, capacity for the Y. I'm sorry? Yeah, improved circulation and pick up and drop off for the Y user.
So I guess the question was, how does it fall on the internet site? What is the solution?
can you speak to the microphone, please? Yes.
The question was more specific about how the solution really responds to the community beyond your property line. And I think it would be of benefit as a question if it would be possible to see what this solution looks like from renderings, more than one probably because one could be very deceiving, taken from Asbury Avenue looking at this building and its impact on the historic district. In terms of the siting of the building as it relates to the overall site plan.
Okay. So that's basically a request to see a rendering. And,
I'd have to get with the client and figure out if they're willing to commission that if it seems necessary. I mean, I will say again that the 3-story portion of the building has a pitched roof. Yeah. It's actually closer to the lot line and it's taller. Yeah. So, there is some sense, there's large trees. We don't have that rendering and it would take, some effort to create. So I can't really promise that as I stand here.
Right. And I would venture to say that the benefit of the plan development is the mission of the Y. I mean, that they're improving women's lives and the entire mission that we're lucky to have as a community, in my opinion. But that would be, what I would see as the benefit of the plan. So being able to serve more Evanstonians and so. All right. So that was basically your list of questions, I think, right? No. Okay. All right. Why don't we move on then? Tom Rowland, please. Couldn't get inside seating, huh?
I didn't get on StubHub fast enough.
Yep.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for holding this event. Tom Rowland, 1735 Asbury Avenue, so a little bit just north and west of the site in question tonight that we're discussing. Just one fact, and I appreciate everyone's input. I'm a licensed architect with a firm in Chicago. I've been on this side of the fence, so now I'm on this side of the fence. So it's kind of interesting perspective here. So, but I'll try and be brief. One question to start specifically is, and I appreciate the staff and the applicant's desire to continue to work on the aesthetic of the design. It's a pretty broad statement, though, when you say aesthetic. So is there parameters that define what we'll be looking at? I know we're asking for site plan approval tonight, but aesthetically, it could be the materiality of the building. It could be the mass and scale of the building is part of an aesthetic. So site plan approval may or may not preclude or exclude some design moves or some site impact moves. I think just clarity on that would be helpful. I appreciate the applicant's comments on sort of, again, refuse was closer to my property. Now it's further away, but it's still, I think, an impact to the west side applicants. But I appreciate the study. Acoustics was discussed. Materiality's been discussed. There is one question I have on the north side of the domestic violence and admin building, where it steps down to the lower portion. There's a large wall that goes out to the west, and I understand it separates the northern parking lot from the adjacent sort of backyard protected garden space. But I think the height of that wall is typically, I think we're seeing 6 foot as our height in the city of Evanston for fences and things like that. I think that comes out at a little higher scale. So just a question of what that height is and if there's some variance or some ability to shift that. Number 3, I think this was back to my neighbor's question on the view from from Asbury looking east towards the building. I actually think it was one of the comments in the Preservation Commission to have that study done, or at least that render done, so we could verify that. I believe that was one of the statements in the Preservation Commission that they asked to see that rendering to show the impact from the historic district looking at this new structure. And then lastly, and again, I think the comment was made that by Karen, that you want to balance the height of the building to the volume of the building to the people they want to serve and things like that. And that, the building is going to be lower than the highest point on the adjacent parcel, the historic parcel today. I would still ask if there's studies to be made in the orientation of that location, because again, you're talking about a 47-foot tall vertical wall that is non-residential in feel. And so we're talking about an apple and an orange in some respects. So I would ask if there's a potential of some study analyzing sort of the back of what would basically look like a hotel versus a residential look and feel option. And that's all I have. Oh, I'm sorry. One last thing too. I guess, and this was made by Mr. Lewis here, the benefit of the mission, I think we all agree it's a value add to Evanston, and the benefit of the mission is for all Evanstonians. But I would ask that this commission, we have to look at the people, again, that are directly to the west of this property are potentially impacted by this planned development and potentially negatively on property values. And I know for myself and people along that way, part of that is their retirement fund when they sell that house and they move on and things like that. So I think that should be part of the analysis of adjacent property and the value impacted by such development. I appreciate it for the whole neighborhood and for all of Evanston, and I totally agree with it. That should be something that should be contemplated as well.
All right, so as an answer to number 4 is yes, that is one of the standards that is considered, is the impact on residents within the area. So that will be addressed.
Thank you.
So numbers 1, 2, and 3 are what is the process of the aesthetic review that might be better for staff to, it was asked by Commissioner Halleck, but I guess specifically would that be, is there going to be another DAPR review, or is that done? So other. That's not what I understood, but I mean.
No, I meant
what's
it as Mr. Halleck means. Just the statement that to continue to work on the aesthetic design is a pretty broad statement. What falls in the parameters of aesthetic design development? Is it the color of the window openings? Is it the materiality of the precast or the curtain wall or the metal panels that are proposed in a historic district? Is it the mass and scale of the building? I think it's
Yeah, okay,
a little more detailed.
okay. So,
I could just speak to, we are studying this in the office already. Materiality, breaking down the look of the scale, it's not going to shrink. The program isn't going to shrink. But we are looking at ways to sort of break it down into pieces, openings, mostly material, and breaking down the box of it is where we're at now. As far as what Scott and staff are, I don't know what boxes they want to check.
Gotcha. I mean, I guess I would, we talked a little bit, the wise attorney, the canyon effect on Ridge we're trying to avoid. However, we're creating a new canyon effect for the people that face west, would be my point.
yeah. Is that a question? Are we or are we not? It's an east-west oriented building, so there's the minimal dimension of the building facing Asbury and the neighbors there. So
Yeah,
okay.
I guess if you live 60 feet away, it'd be a different question, I guess.
Well, I'm not saying it's not imposing on you. I'm saying it's the least wide side. Right. So I think we talked about the materiality.
Maybe the low.
The fence, yes, the fence height was one. Yeah, can you speak into the
We're happy to
microphone?
revisit that as well.
Okay.
We need to make sure it feels nice and secure where the kids are playing, in the case of other family members.
But it will follow
attempting to
the
get involved,
ordinance.
But we will, yeah.
It will follow the ordinance. And then, I'm sorry, what do you have as the third one? Origination of, the orientation, yeah. So is there any studies of orientation that are contemplated?
And similar to the trash location, but at much greater time and different studies, we've looked at all of this being to the south, all of it being to the north, adding to the top. We've probably presented it to Karen and the board 9 times at this point, and this just kept lending itself in efficiency, the double-loaded corridor, the fact that this can be built while people stay housed in the existing shelter. They can then move while that's torn down and rehab the rest of the space. So it's sort of a vague answer, but we have really worked it to death.
So the answer is no, you think you've arrived at the...
And there's economy there. I mean, in all honesty, there's a lot of factors.
No is a good answer.
Sorry.
That's fine. Okay. So I believe we'll go on to the next questioner. So it's not clear on this list whether Judy Berg wanted to speak to this or the next. The next. Okay, that's fine. Okay, I'll just do that. So Evelyn McGowan. Okay, so then we'll save that for later then. Okay. So now that is done, it's now time that the public has their opportunity to comment and present their opinions on the matter. You will be, again, you'll have to come up to the microphone, state your name and address, and you'll be limited to 2 minutes to voice your opinion. So we'll go back and ask Mary McWilliams. Yeah?
I could see it. I could see it from my seat. Didn't want to.
I don't need it. I'm not going to use it. Anyway, I'm Mary McWilliams. I live at 1606 Wesley Avenue, which is within 1,000 feet of the YWCA property. Before I comment on the Y's proposed construction, I would like to say I recognize the importance of its work, and I understand the organization's need to expand the physical plant, and I'm glad that the organization has been able to find a way to do so and stay in Evanston. My concern with the new construction is that neither the new building nor the connecting corridor shows any contextual relationship whatsoever to the buildings that will remain on the property. The soaring roof, the brilliant white wall color, and the metal siding of the corridor bear no relationship to the 1970s tan brick buildings with gable roofs. What I'm going to say next is a bit harsh, but it was my immediate reaction when I saw the drawing. The new shelter building with its narrow windows set in walls that cant inward towards the glass reminds me more of the Metropolitan Correction Center, a prison, and less like a place of welcome and protection. The explanation given was that the windows were to be narrow so abusers could not see in, but the shelter residences are to be on the 3rd and 4th stories of the building, begging the question of who can see in. The brilliant white walls with day-glow orange accents show no respect for the surrounding buildings on the lot in the neighborhood, and call unnecessary, and I would think unwanted attention to the building. Finally, as a longtime preservationist in Evanston, I am disappointed that the historic house at the corner of Ridge and Church is to come down. The building was designed by Joseph Lyman Silsby, an important 19th century Chicago architect, and the site is where the eastern boundary of the Ridge Historic District of single-family houses turns west from Ridge Avenue to continue north on Asbury Avenue. In addition, the apartment house across the street at 1703 to 1715 Ridge is a local landmark and is listed in the National Register of Historic Places. The 3 courtyard buildings in the 1600 blocks of Ridge are a part of a multiple property historic district entitled Suburban Apartment Buildings in Evanston, Illinois, listed both locally and in the National Register. The buildings in these 2 blocks, both the apartment houses and the single-family houses, have existed as compatible neighbors for 100 years, in large part because each building type demonstrates a respect for the other type in massing, materials, color, and fenestration. When the apartment houses were built in the early 20th century, they acknowledged the brick Italianate houses on the west side of the 1600 block of Ridge. Those houses are now part of the Ridge Historic District. Likewise, when the architects designed the Y swimming pool and other building in the 70s, the firm clearly took into consideration the surrounding buildings. The 1970s buildings do not copy the style of the older buildings, but in the choice of the tan brick siding, they are respectful of the materials and colors of the houses to the south, the apartment houses to the east, and the office building and warehouse to the north. I support the Plan Commission's recommendation for further work on the aesthetics of the project. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well stated. All right, Dave Brannigan again. Please say it when you get up to the microphone.
I'm sorry. This wasn't going to be part of my comment, but when I heard about the trash location, I got a little bothered. For 24 years, we've lived with 5 o'clock pickups from garbage trucks at our back door. 2 dumpsters every day, 7 days a week. Now, the plan shows 8 containers being dumped. 8 containers in one enclosure, again, in our backyard. If that's not an adverse impact to the property value, I don't know what is. And I wish you would consider that, because come to my house sometime around 6 o'clock in the morning, tell me if you can sleep through it. That's all. I'm done.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Your concern is noted. Elizabeth Rack. There you are.
I would like to, 1719 Asbury, I would like to echo Mary's thoughts, because it was very articulate and really embraced the spirit of of a building and its impact on other buildings around it. And I would really request that the aesthetics of this building be looked at more closely, and its context with the historic district and just with the other areas, other buildings within this area. I'm also very concerned about the light levels that will be generated from this building. It's when one looks at the floor plans, the community room where the big dining room is really is facing north right into the historic houses that are going to be have been there for over 100 years. And I am also very concerned about the noise from the HVAC units. They're very loud now. One of my neighbors took a reading and it was over 50 decibels early in the morning, and that's without the expansion that's happening. The current location of the HVAC units are forming almost like a courtyard cannon, so it'll be amplification. I know that we did talk to the Y, and they are going to be they are having some acousticians looking at that. It doesn't necessarily mean that they will follow it. I know, being an architect myself, that you get advice, but you don't always follow it. And would like to know what kind of measures will be taken so that we don't have that noise level that will be in the house and the surrounding neighbors as well. And again, I just really request that the aesthetics of this building be looked at more closely, particularly as it relates to the beauty of Evanston. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Tom Rowland, please. You can walk, that's fine.
I appreciate all the comments so far. Tom Rowland, 1735 Asbury. So I won't take up any much more time, but one thing I would say too, just on the plan development, I think it's talking about, I believe, a 19% allowable increase in the development space, which again is sort of reducing the significant amount of tree growth on the property and things like that. So again, I think an enhanced landscape plan and buffers towards the property to the west could be, a very positive solution. And then I support all the comments sort of by my neighbors before, so thanks.
And lastly, Evelyn McCowan.
Hello. So I started taking my son to swim lessons at the Y 13 years ago, and then drop off and pick up was always a hassle. So I'm very happy to see that addressed here in the site with additional parking and much better circulation. And I actually think that the old house was not serving the shelter well, and so I'm glad to see a new building in that. And I actually don't believe that trying to do some mimicking of historic buildings works out well when you're trying to do a new, modern, efficient, economically designed and constructed building that's sustainable. So I actually welcome something that's new and innovative and looks like it was built now, because it's going to last another 50 years or 100 years. So I don't think we need to shy away from white, and I think that precast concrete is a very viable material to use in this kind of application. I don't think that the buildings to the south are all that attractive, and nor the one to the north. So I think the best thing to do is build a good new building, and I would encourage that rather than trying to mimic neighbors to the west.
All right, I think we've gotten everyone who would like to speak. So with that, I will close the public I think that's fine. I thought you came up and signed, maybe not. Okay. Okay. All right. please come up and state your name, and then I'll have you, after you're done, will you please fill out this list, all right?
Good evening. I'm Joan Safford. I live at 1618 Wesley Avenue and therefore received one of the postcards because I am within 1,000 feet of the subject property. My concern is the aesthetics of the back building, but most particularly the aesthetics of what I've variously called along, referring to the tunnel, which is the way it appears from the street. And it also appears, and the thought came to me, it sort of is like a skateboard place that you would come down. And showing up the way it does facing east, showing up as it does coming out into my neighborhood where I walk that block absolutely every single day in the morning, the aesthetics of that seems to me to be inappropriate. And it seems to me that you could create a lobby area that integrated the two brick buildings with brick and with the entryway, rather than having, which would mean having it come out a little bit farther in front, I guess, but still would be way back from Church Street, but would allow you to look over at the building and not feel that this thing is leaping out at you, either as you walk along Church Street, as you walk up Church Street, coming up the hill and seeing it loom, or as you walk east on Church Street, which all of these are walks that I take, and once again, it would be coming up. It is a most prominent feature of the building, both because of the oddity of its shape and because it's narrow, and it's one thing to say that the historic neighborhood, that particular area, we lost the building on the south to fire. This building is coming down because it's old and not useful anymore. But it's one thing to take those buildings down and say they are gone, and it's another to say in your face to this neighborhood where I have now lived for 53 years, walking every day, to say, this is okay, we will just put this skateboard thing into your face. It can be done much more gracefully, and I urge you to work out some kind of way to integrate it with the brick in all directions. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
I will-
Yeah, it's not signing, it's just making sure we have your address on the record and things. So if you could step down to the end, it would be great. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, all right. Yeah, we'd like to kind of move on, so. All right, with no further public comment, I'm going to close the public comment portion of the meeting. And well, actually, I guess I'm not going to close it. I'm going to unclose it. I'm going to give the petitioner one opportunity to rebut if they would like to anything or make a closing statement.
Thank you. So unless you disagree, I believe that all of the questions that were presented during the public question session have been addressed. Is that an accurate statement?
As
Okay.
best as
So then I think that only leaves the comments that were raised. Needless to say, I think we would all agree that the repeated theme here presented from the public comments relates to aesthetics. As we said from the outset, we're committed to a condition of approval that obligates the applicant to continue to work with staff, which would invariably be reflective of comments from the public on the design aesthetics. To the point that was raised earlier, and I apologize, I don't recall specifically who asked it. I guess it was Mr. Rowland. From our perspective, we believe, based on the extensive amount of thought that's been put into the overall site plan design, that the scope of the aesthetics, as referenced in proposed condition number 1, would relate to material and color. So from our perspective, we don't think it's productive to continue to evaluate building location or orientation or related types of modifications to the overall footprint of the proposed built improvements. As Jack, the project architect, referenced earlier, there's been extensive thought put into that. As I generally referenced, there was very thoughtful consideration given to orientation for reasons that are not necessarily obvious. We're happy to further discuss that to whatever extent you may desire. As I referenced in my initial remarks this evening, the improvements that are proposed are part of a partial redevelopment of the site. And the portion of the site that is not being demolished is largely driving the architectural character of what's being proposed. While there's an effort, as Jack mentioned, to sort of freshen and liven the building improvements, needless to say, there's also an effort being made to meld what is being proposed in the way of new construction with the existing architectural character. And again, with that in mind, we're mindful of the need to and happy to continue to discuss aesthetic modifications relating to color and building materials. Relative to trash enclosure, I mean, I think I can safely say that we're gladly willing to continue to have that discussion, but quite frankly, we don't know what better alternative there is. As we indicated, we've looked at a number of options and in the end come back to the same location where it's existed for decades. Relative to landscape enhancements, I guess my statement earlier was probably inaccurate in that we are equally willing to evaluate landscape enhancements specifically along that western property line. So that would fall, I guess, within the aesthetic design scope referenced in proposed condition 1. And then I think the only other comment that I really kind of haven't already hit on relates to mechanical noise. And as I think it was Ms. Brack referenced, the YW has been working with a consulting noise expert, and we'll continue to be doing that for the purpose of ensuring compliance with the city's mechanical noise related regulations. My recollection is that that permissible noise level at the property line is 55 decibels, and needless to say that YW would be committed to complying with that requirement. I think that's it.
Okay, thank you very much. Staff, Mr. Mangum, any comments? Okay. All right, so that will close the public session. So commissioners, do you have any questions or comments that you would like to make, or issues that you would like to, opinions you'd like to put forth? Commissioner Isaac.
A few thoughts. Number one, the project overall, I think, is a net positive. There are two issues that I think were raised during the testimony today that I think require some thought. Number one is the enhanced landscaping for the neighbors to the west. I think that's a reasonable ask from the neighbors, and I think it's something that the YWCA should be held to act reasonably and provide some further landscaping on that end. The second issue is something that that hits close to home for me, and that is the trash and trash pickup. I myself live along Church Avenue or Church Street, and hear and see those trucks coming up and down Church, and I believe it was Mr. Brannigan that mentioned it, that you can hear them as early as 5 o'clock in the morning. I can confirm that. My recommendation, especially in light of the fact that we were told that the trash, at least the trash enclosures would increase by about, or trash production would increase by about 50%. That might mean that there's 50% more trash containers, and which will, increase the amount of time and amount of noise and length of noise that the neighbors hear. I think one of the plan development requirements should be that the YWCA cannot have trash pickup before a certain time, like 9 a.m. If they have to work with their scavenger service to ensure that the trash pickup happens at a later time, I think that addresses an existing problem and makes sure that the problem does not intensify as a result of the increase. Those are my comments.
I'm going to have some of the same comments. Just continuing on the truck and the trash issue. I'm not sure. I was looking at the site plan, and to your question of do you have any other ideas? The only one looking at the geometry is, can that trash and truck dock move closer to the YWCA's building as opposed to right up against the residence, or maybe the truck docks are reoriented north-south, something like that. But I don't know that that's the whole problem. And I think what Commissioner Isaac raised, the sound problem is an issue. So when you talk about mechanical noise, I think definitely the either scheduling or somehow to mitigate the truck dock noise, I think is very, very important. And I have a list of things. I agree to the person who brought up lighting. Those things can be mitigated if it's light coming from the inside. Maybe at night there's blinds or something. I don't know. I think that sounds like a simple thing, but important thing. The idea that was brought up of the view from Asbury, I do think that's important, and I think when you're adjacent to a historic district, it's important to show the residents what that view is like. But I also think that maybe a section through an east-west section showing the relationship of the height of the building to the height of the residence and the distance between the two, and how the screening might mitigate the view from the houses. I realize landscape has to grow, but something like that. And to that point, and to the person who talked about, okay, what is the scope of the aesthetic review? Have you? Well, I don't want to put this in a question, but you might want to consider stepping the building back so that maybe the first two floors are like the site plan shows, but then the upper two floors are set back. I don't know that would help the situation, but I think relative to what the neighbors are concerned about, they're concerned about a big building right up against their property, and it may or may not help. I don't know, but I think it's something to look at. As far as the, I don't think it's just a matter of color. I think it's materiality also. So I would challenge that comment about, well, it's just a matter of changing the color. I don't think it is. Landscape buffer was talked about. I totally agree, and as dense as possible is a good idea. Evergreens, great idea. And lastly, with all these concerns, and frankly, as long as I've been on the commission, I don't remember a project that has had so many zoning asks that are, and concerns actually expressed, that are left to the other committees. And I realize that our purview is limited, but given that these are fairly significant issues, I'm just wondering whether that's leaving it to the other groups or staff to work out these things is fine, but I just wonder whether, because there are several things that are being addressed, should this group come before our group again, just to present what the new design? Because there's site plan issues, there's massing issues, there's materiality issues, there's color issues, there's lots of things. So
I'm going to interject at this point that that the purpose here and whatever we find today is not a yes or no approval. We're a recommending body, and we make a recommendation to the city council, who will officially have yay or nay, up or down vote on the matter. So there will be other opportunities to see, for people, the public, to see items. So Commissioner Goddard.
Yeah, I would just like to say that Evanston's very lucky to have had this organization in its town for 50 years. I enthusiastically support this planned development. I think there are some issues. I wish this building were a little less institutional looking, but I support the entire planned development as presented.
Any comments? All right, I guess I'm going to make my say, and then we'll try to figure out what kind of recommendation we'll make. As far as the aesthetics go, I kind of am between the opinion of that I don't think it should be a mimicry of a historic building, but I also I believe it should be modern, but I think it should be a modern that's sympathetic, both materiality-wise and proportion and rhythm-wise to the surrounding context. So there are very nice examples of this. I believe that there's a Catholic school on Sheridan Road that has done a marvelous addition to a Gothic school building that has wonderful kind of proportions, but is expressed in kind of a modern way, so that the materials and the proportions and the rhythms are all very sympathetic. So I would encourage that as the goal toward this aesthetic. Also, I have a little bit of I agree also about the front entry. I think it could be much more sympathetic to the historic district that it faces. So that being said, I believe in modernism, but I also being a step kind of toward the future. I would also like to see, I believe in my opinion that we can't say that there's no detrimental effect unless the immediate neighbors have some sort of protection. So I would like to see us include in a recommendation some sort of landscaping buffer and consideration of the trash, either location or time, whatever solution that does minimize the impact to the community. I have to agree though with the staff report about the loading dock, and I can't see that there is that many deliveries that it will become a significant thing. I might have and should have asked the question about being a pool building. Do you have laundry service pickup? Do you have, that kind of thing? What constitutes the kind of deliveries that are happening at that dock? But it seems that this kind of use is fairly light, and even the residents would not have, significant move-in kind of uses for the dock. That said, I think we have our usual choices of either recommending approval as per this presentation, or approval with modifications, or denying. So is there any modifications that we would, heading toward a motion that we would want to include within this?
Are you suggesting that we propose modifications and vote on those modifications and then vote on the
I think
package as
I
a
would
whole?
propose someone's making a motion that would include any additional modifications that would be part of the. Oh, we have to do the standards. Okay. My bad. All right. So why don't we go through the standards? So first would be the standard for special uses. So, can you see this?
Sure, I can give it a shot. So it's standard one is for special use standards is one of the special use standards specifically listed in the zoning ordinance.
And it is.
Is in keeping with the purposes and policies of the adopted comprehensive general plan, and the zoning ordinance is amended from time to time.
I would say that it is. Yeah, it has been found.
Will not cause a negative cumulative effect when its effect is considered in conjunction with the cumulative effect of various special uses of all types in the immediate neighborhood and the effect of the proposed type of special use upon the city as a whole.
So this is
specific to use, correct?
Yeah, specific to use, right?
And in this case, the planned development's a special use as well as the community center, recreation center.
Yeah. So I mean, it is basically an enhancement of an existing use. So there's no change in that status. So I would say it's satisfied.
And it does not interfere with or diminish the value of property in the neighborhood.
So that's one of the things that we would like to probably address. There is some concern. There's no evidence of financial lessening, but possibly some enjoyment of that property. So,
well, not the enjoyment of the property, but the, I guess, the views from the property, right?
I don't see how we can
Yeah.
make this statement.
Yeah.
I don't see how we can. It says it does not.
right.
I don't think we can say that.
Okay. So we'd say it's not satisfied.
Wait, it's not satisfied, or it's, or it does not interfere?
So are you saying it will cause a negative effect on the community?
I'm just saying that we can't make this statement.
Not
I don't think we
interfere
can say
or
that it does
diminish
not.
the value of the property.
I don't think we've expressed concerns here that could.
I disagree.
I don't. I think the residents have brought up issues that could have an effect on their property. I think we've talked about things that could, and we're making recommendations that if not done, if not addressed, could have a negative effect. So I'm just saying that we can't.
But how can we know that? I mean, everyone that comes before us says, if we
has
approve
some.
this, it's going to have a negative effect on my neighborhood, and it never does.
Okay.
If there's,
I don't. I don't agree with you. I think this is, in this case, there have been very specific issues brought up that some of us have addressed and are going to be addressed by the applicant. I'm just saying that I don't think we can make this statement.
But Commissioner Halleck,
so
if the recommendation to the city council were modified to say that the applicant had to enhance landscaping, had to there was limitation on hours of garbage pickup, that I think would address most, if not all, most of the concerns that were raised by neighbors.
Yeah, I think we should consider this as that if we do it with modifications, that we can say that it would be satisfied if it's passed with modifications per Commissioner Isaac's comments. So can it be adequately served by public facilities and services is the next. Staff would say yes. Does it cause undue traffic congestion? There was traffic studies presented within the briefing that say there is minimal added effect to the current conditions, and site conditions are actually improved. It preserves significant historic and architectural resources.
Well, I think we were told that the property, I looked it up, the property is not a historic landmark. It is within the historic district. I know this is one of our standards, but this is really for the Preservation Commission. Having gone through the Preservation Commission and gotten to us, I personally don't know that we've seen that it's going to affect any historical or architectural resources.
I disagree. It's tearing down a Silsbee historic structure, and that's the consequence. Yeah, it's so. But it's so it doesn't.
Every building
satisfy
is
it.
every building is historic, but this has not been listed or recognized as a historic building. All I can say is that looking at the city's records, it wasn't listed as a historic property.
Well, I would say we find that it is it's within a historic district. It's a historic building in that case. I see. That's yes. So okay. So I. I don't believe. All right, staff, can you please clarify?
Sure. So the proposed demolition of the structure is not an Evanston landmark.
So not being a landmark means it's not a historic and architectural resource.
I don't know if I'd go that far, but just to state the fact of it not being Evanston landmark.
Right, exactly. So what is the problem to say that it's not satisfied and that the determination of the landmark, the historic committee has? I'm sorry, I'm not. That's fine. The fact finding is over with now. Okay, all right. So I would have to say that that's not satisfied, actually. So it's not satisfied. It preserves significant natural and environmental features. I think that's not applicable. It complies with all other applicated regulations of the district in which it is located and other applicable ordinances, except to the extent such regulations have been modified through the plan development process or grant of a variation. And I'm going to trust staff has identified all that it's satisfying those issues. So if we can go to the standards for development. All right, so standards for plan developments. As a special use, plan development involves such special considerations of the public interest that it shall be required to adhere to the specific plan development standards established in the zoning district in which it is located. Compliance with the standards shall govern all the recommendations of the Plan Commission applicable to a plan development and the action of the City Council in order to ensure that the approved plan development is in harmony with the general purposes and intent of the zoning ordinance. The Plan Commission shall not recommend approval, nor shall the City Council approve a plan development unless each shall determine based on written findings of fact that the plan development satisfies the specific standards established in the zoning district in which the plan development is located. Well, I believe that it's been outlined that except for the items that are under consideration, that this is within the general determinants of the what it's R4 and the plan development is in the public interest. So standards and guidelines for plan developments in R4 district. Each plan development shall be compatible with surrounding development and shall not be of such a nature in height, bulk, or scale as to exercise any influence contrary to the purpose and intent of the zoning ordinance as set forth in section 6.1.2, purpose and intent of this title. Commissioners? So
the height of the building is obviously higher than what is currently allowed. That being said, the building that's being demolished, according to the plan, is higher than what is currently allowed. I believe the top of the existing building is something like, it looked like 43 or 44 feet to the top of the arch. But 45 feet is more than 35, and there's no going around that.
But it's within the allowable site development allowances. And I would go further to say that the major structure is located on the side that is, although it's not, that is adjacent to the least impact on neighbors by being to the north side where it's not a residential district.
It's a commercial district.
Yeah, and there are larger structures and including in the general area. So I would say that the height, bulk, and scale is not overly burdensome. So each plan development shall be compatible with and implement the adopted comprehensive general plan as amended and adopted land use or urban design plan specified to the area, the zoning ordinance, and any other pertinent city planning and development policies.
We've not heard any testimony to the contrary with respect to the comprehensive general plan, and the use is The use is the same.
All right, so the use is the same, so it's satisfied. All landscaping treatment within the planned development shall be provided in accordance with the requirements as set forth in Chapter 17, Landscape and Screening of this title and shown on the required landscape plan submitted as part of the planned development action. I would have to trust staff to tell us that that is within the ordinance. It was not stated as a fact within the report, so I would want to, I noticed there was the parking, added landscaping and the parking islands. There was attempts to do screening. I'm not sure what the requirements are for parkway trees along Ridge, whether that was satisfied or the other items. So is there a statement on that?
So the landscape plan was included and reviewed by DAPR,
It was.
and we'll need to comply. And then additionally, some concerns were brought up about landscaping that could be interpreted or incorporated into any kind of motion.
Okay, all right, yeah, but it meets the ordinance then. All right, so that is satisfied. Can you give me a break? Because it's really making my eyes go buggy, so.
Sure. So the minimum area is greater than 8,000 square feet in the R4 district for plan development. The plan development shall be submitted a tree preservation statement evaluating each building site as to whether desirable tree stands or other natural features exist and can be preserved.
And that was submitted?
Again, a landscape plan
Yes, okay.
submitted with that. For all boundaries of plan development not immediately abutting dedicated and improved public streets, shall be provided a transition landscape strip of at least 10 feet consisting of vegetative screening, fencing, or decorative walls.
And so on the north, is that satisfied? A little about the plan. So yes, it is satisfied.
Walkways developed for plan development shall form a logical, safe, and convenient system for pedestrian access to all dwelling units, all project facilities, as well as any off-site destination likely to attract substantial pedestrian traffic.
Yes, that's satisfied.
The location, construction, operation of parking loading areas and service areas shall be designed to avoid adverse effects on residential uses within or adjoining the development.
So this is our stumbling block again, right? So we could say satisfied if passed, if incorporated as there was. Please.
So the history of this project, and is that it sounds like that the meetings with DAPR and Historic Preservation have all come so quickly after each other, and it sounds like because of that there hasn't been enough time to make any recommended changes or study them and all that. That's what it sounds like to me. So I get that, but it does bother me that these issues have been raised by, well, at least DAPR and maybe some of them by the Preservation Commission, and they keep getting, the project gets approved by each committee with the same concerns, and it's just being, now we're doing the same thing. We're saying, yeah, we totally agree with the mission. We generally, like the project, but there's all these concerns. And so we approve it with the concerns. And it just like we're it seems like we're just kicking it down the road and it goes to the next committee. And, I don't know. I have an issue with it, I guess. And the other thing I want to say is that because it seems like I'm negative on the project, and I'm not really. And I also want to say that Landon Boombaker are great architects. I think though if you look at the work they've done, it's really good stuff. Mm-hmm. Good solid stuff, and they have a very good sense, I think, of aesthetics and massing and all the things that make good architecture. I think that in this case we need to listen to the to the neighbors too. And you could have a viewpoint that says that, very different, very modern, very, out there is a good response. But I think they're questioning that response, and I think we have to listen, and that's why. But anyway,
How about for the standard, though, the location and construction and operation of parking, loading areas, and service areas shall be designed to.
So
avoid
my
adverse-
question is, if you answer all these things with, is it correct to answer these issues with, if they change it, it'll be okay? That's what we're saying. If you change it, it'll be okay. I don't know that that's appropriate.
Well, we're recommending approval only if they change it to satisfy, yes, to satisfy.
And even
Yes.
if we were to recommend not approval because a standard wasn't satisfied, the city council could still disagree with us and approve. So we're gonna look at it to the best of our ability
Right.
and make a recommendation.
Okay. So I would say that if there's consideration given in the recommendation that these issues that have been vetted within the discovery of this hearing were included, that it would satisfy that.
Who's to say when it's done? I mean, you tell them to make modifications and then,
Yeah, you have to you have to get on the record.
at what point do we say that the modifications have been made, and who would say the modifications have been made satisfactorily? That's what I don't understand. Approve with modifications, and then what?
That was the whole question about the process of the review for staff.
And so have we resolved that? Does it just go back to staff?
I don't think this. I know we're talking about these. There being open issues for this development, but I don't think this situation is very uncommon. I think pretty much every single development that comes by this commission always has one or two things that we say, okay, continue to work with staff, okay? And so what we're recommending to the city council, and what the city council ultimately approves, is putting the authority in staff's hands for those, those minor or sometimes, less than minor issues that need to be resolved. And so if the authority is given to staff and staff says you haven't met it, then staff can say, no, you can't move forward, and you're not going to get a building permit and whatever.
And staff, I assume, since you're working for the city of Evanston, you will take into account comments that have been made in these meetings to a certain degree.
Sure, and again, the more specific concern is that can be worded as a condition, and you can have a timing mechanism on that condition that prior to issuance of building permit, prior to occupancy, give some sort of timing there, and then indicate if the commission feels that it's staff's discretion, prior to this date, staff shall approve this as that to address such and such concern. So I think the more specific it is, the more meat it has to it when it gets put into an ordinance.
Okay, so let's move on. Where did we leave off, Mr. Mangum?
Principal vehicular access points shall be designed to permit smooth traffic flow with controlled turning movements and minimize hazards to vehicular and pedestrian traffic.
Yes, I believe there is one concern, though, with the access off of Ridge with the right turn, right in, right out only, and the issue of a pork chop or not to pork chop. So,
on Google Maps, I was looking at it, and Google Maps property just to the north has a Ridge curb cut, and you can see all the tire tracks of people turning left in, or turning left in there. So like I said, I live in the area.
Yes.
I don't really see people turning left around there, but it obviously does happen.
I think on the site plan that was included with the packet, a pork chop is not included, but my recollection is that it has been added to the site plan that was shown tonight. So that, I think, is a positive revision
So,
to the
and
access
the
point.
main concern with having it was the entry for when the trash was located there, that the truck couldn't manipulate the pork chop. So, all right, well, I would say that at this point in time, it does meet the standard.
Planned development shall provide, if possible, for underground utilities, both in public ways and private extensions thereof.
So is there a modification to the public utilities happening here? There's no modification or varying of overhead lines or anything, right?
I do not believe so.
As served currently. So
Finally, the zoning administrator may, at his discretion, require additional studies or impact analyses, and those have not been requested.
all right. So in the interest of coming to some sort of conclusion, is there a motion that would incorporate the concerns that have been discussed here? Or is anyone venturing an attempt at this? Commissioner Isaac.
Yeah. I move that we accept staff's recommendation to approve the project with the following 3 modifications. The condition 1 that was referenced by staff, the applicant shall continue to work on the aesthetic design of the building additions, I think should be appended to add the words "to the satisfaction of city staff." Add a condition number 4 that the applicant increase the landscaping on the west end of the project to the satisfaction of city staff to address landscaping issues raised by neighbors, and condition number 5 that the applicant be prohibited from scheduling or having garbage pickups prior to 9 a.m. Sunday through Saturday. That is my motion.
Second.
Okay, the motion has been made and seconded without modification, so I guess we go right to a vote.
All right. Commissioner Dubin? Commissioner Goddard?
Aye.
Commissioner Halleck? Commissioner Isaac?
Aye.
Commissioner Sloss?
That's me.
And Chair Lewis?
Aye.
That passes.
All right, so we have made a recommendation with conditions that the city council pass your request.
Thank you.
All right. So we've been at this for a very long time. Do I hear a motion to take a 10-minute recess from anyone? No?
5-minute recess.
5-minute recess then. 5-minute recess.
Yes.
And moved, seconded, yay.
Yay.
All right, everyone, I think we should get restarted. Everyone, if you can please take your seats. All right. The meeting of the Evanston Plan Commission of August 7th, 2019 is reconvened at 9:30 p.m. So the next item on the agenda is a text amendment. By the way, all the things I said about giving evidence and the procedure will be exactly the same as the prior hearing. So this is a text amendment regarding special events in the U2 district, 19 PLND 0032. Staff, Ms. Jones, would you like to present?
Sure. Good evening, everyone. This next item, as stated, is a text amendment that was a request submitted by Northwestern to amend the regulations within the U2 district. Real quick, I do want to address, because there's been multiple members of the public who have brought up this concern. This is considered a text amendment, as it is dealing with changing the wording within the regulations for this district. We have consulted with our corporation counsel, and he's done research and also concluded that this is a text amendment, and we have noticed, as the zoning code requires for text amendments. So I don't know if you want to add anything else to that, or
Chair Lewis, members of the commission, Hugh Bose, Assistant City Attorney. We've reviewed both the text amendment and a submission by citizens indicating an argument for a map amendment based on what was submitted by Northwestern, what's here. We are confident that this is, in fact, a text amendment, was properly noticed. We feel like both of those are gating issues because they impact what type of notice you would receive. And while we are late, and I know this is something taken out of your day, but the only thing worse would be if we had to do this twice. So we take this issue very seriously in getting the notice correct and getting this decision correct, and we're confident that we've done so. Thank you.
Right. Please continue.
All right, so as I mentioned, this is a text amendment to amend the language as it relates to items within the U2 district. This district is on the northern side of the city. It incorporates all of the athletic facilities on Northwestern's campus, as well as some parking to the east of those facilities. The existing regulations, this particular district was created and is intended to permit the utilization of university facilities within the district in a manner that is compatible with the surrounding development, which is predominantly residential. The zoning code, specifically subsection 615.72, permitted uses, has the following permitted uses: business or vocational school, field house, college or university indoor recreational facilities, outdoor recreational facilities that are college and university related, parking lot that is college and university related, playground, and a stadium. Now the list that is here, when the listed items are conducted in association with the permitted uses that I just mentioned, they will also be considered permitted uses, and that includes intramural and intercollegiate sports and athletic events and practice therefore, local, regional, and state, elementary and high school athletic events and practice therefore, band playing and practice in connection with the above events, commencement, convocation, and graduation exercises, university-sponsored lectures, speakers, musical performances, and other cultural events held within an enclosed building, provided that the attendance is limited to 10,000 or less. Luncheons and dinners and dining room facilities in a stadium, provided that attendance is limited to the seating capacity of the facilities. Accessory uses to the above permitted uses, including administrative and faculty offices, classrooms, auditoriums, athletic facilities, and parking spaces, and off-street parking for hospital employees and for university students and employees. This section also permits temporary events that are permitted provided that they are community or cultural in nature, and further provided that they meet the conditions that are listed below. The community and cultural events of a nonprofit nature intended primarily for residents of the city and amateur athletic events shall be permitted provided that the following conditions are met. The sponsors of the temporary event obtain a certificate of zoning compliance pursuant to section 6482 of this title. Attendance at such event is limited to 10,000 persons or less. Adequate university parking is available and is provided to all persons attending the event. Private security is provided for those parking areas utilized. Adequate provision of traffic control devices at no city expense, including personnel, should be provided to ensure that the free flow of traffic and security and safety of said traffic flow. Live animals that are used in conjunction with any event may only be stored within a completely enclosed building. No more than 7 such events shall be held in any calendar year in any one facility, and each such event shall not exceed 5 consecutive days in duration. Lighting associated with such events shall be directed away from adjacent residences. And finally, tractor trailers may not remain running while parked on the public street or in off-street parking areas. Now, this chart shows the current annual events that are held within Welsh Ryan Arena. They include Northwestern's basketball games, wrestling, volleyball games, Northwestern graduations, the A&O Fall Concert, as well as 3 different high school graduations. And as you can see, we have the amount of each of these events, as well as the usual amount of attendees for each of these events and the time of year that they typically occur. So we have the proposed amendments to this section, and they are basically that currently and culturally, community and cultural events, we will be striking the nonprofit nature of those events and also allow for professional events. So removing the amateur portion of that as well. We'd be changing a number 1 for the requirements, where sponsors of the temporary event shall provide proof of event logistics approval by the city's Special Events Committee and obtain a certificate of zoning compliance. We'd also be changing item 2, actually reducing the maximum number of attendees from 10,000 to 7,000 persons. And then going down a little bit to item number 7, we would be slightly adjusting the requirements for the number of events, where the events would be 6 single-day events, and the 7th event, which would be a multi-day event, and which would still require permission from the city of Evanston in order to occur for each calendar year. We also would be adding in a sunset provision. So basically, as it states there, the provisions in this text amendment approved by the ordinance, which has yet to be drafted, expire 2 years after its approval, unless the City Council affirmatively votes to renew the amendment. This chart more clearly lays out the differences between what the original language is and what is proposed. We can go back to this chart if need be as we get further into discussion and questions. And then there are only 4 standards for the text amendment, which we can also review once we get to that portion of deliberation and discussion. So I will entertain any questions and open it back up.
All right, are there any questions from commissioners? Commissioner Sloss?
I just had a question about, so the condition number 1 indicated that the proof of events logistics approval by the city special events committee. Is there specific standard things that are reviewed by the city events, special events committee as part of that approval?
Well, that particular committee reviews a number of the events that happen within the city. It is not unsimilar to our design and project review committee, where it's a number of staff members that look at the different logistics. So we've got the fire department and police department, as well as public works that look at what extra utilities may need to be used. And the fire department will look at whether or not they have space for emergency vehicles to go through. Police would consider whether or not additional personnel would be needed for security. So it's things of that nature that might affect city resources that are looked at.
Have professional events been allowed under the current wording?
Not under the current wording. There have been events in the past. I believe it's been more decades ago. I know in the 70s, the Bears played one of their games on campus, or I think within Welsh Ryan Arena. I don't think it was named that at the time. And then also there was a concert that was held that I don't believe had permission at the time.
So concerts would be a professional event that would be allowed under this?
With the conditions that are stated.
With the new one, yeah.
Commissioner Isaac.
So for a temporary event with an attendance cap at 7,000, we're not talking about Ryan Field.
No.
We're talking about Welsh Ryan.
Essentially.
Or, you know, to the extent there's a lot of people that want to watch baseball or softball, but we're really talking about Welsh Ryan Arena. And the chart of uses under the current ordinance that you provided, those all basically fall under the permitted use, right? None of these items listed are any of the temporary events that that are being proposed.
Right. That's correct.
One more question. Currently, when actually two more questions. Currently, when Northwestern sells tickets to any of their events, does the city of Evanston collect any amusement tax for that?
That I'm not sure about.
Chair Lewis, I can answer that. They do not collect an amusement tax for sporting events. There's a separate sporting event. That's ticketing tax, amusement tax. Sporting events do not qualify as amusements. It's a separate tax.
Okay, but it would be the expectation of the city of Evanston that it would collect amusement tax revenue from the events that would fall under these temporary events.
If you're referring to concerts, absolutely, because I know that falls in the definition of amusement. But I would have to look at the event individually. If it's a sporting event, it would be a separate tax. If it's a concert, it's amusement tax. If it's something else, then we would just need to do an analysis if it qualifies as an amusement under the code, which most ticketed things do.
Okay, thank you. And my final question is, there is a phrase in the existing ordinance that is not being modified, and that's intended primarily for residents of the city, that the events are intended primarily for the residents of the city. This might be a question better for the applicant, but has there been any discussion on how they would intend to meet that threshold?
I don't think we've had specific discussions related to that particular aspect of it. That is something that could definitely be considered or discussed further.
Okay. All right. Any other questions from commissioners? Okay. So does Northwestern, would you like to make a presentation? Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you very much for the opportunity this evening. If I could just quickly answer that last question before I give a brief statement. The answer is we are very excited about the notion of doing something very specifically for the Evanston residents if we were to get this opportunity. And what we would do, which is something pretty common in the business, is that we would offer a pre-sale simply to Evanston residents prior to going on any general sale for an event, with the hope that we would actually sell it out with just Evanston residents and not even have to go on a public sale. That's not the intent. Okay. Anyway, thank you again for the opportunity. Simply put, we are proposing to receive the ability to host a limited number of concerts and sporting events over a 2-year time frame, allowing us to prove the ability to host these events in a neighborly, responsible manner. During this process, we have met with city staff, our alderwoman several times, as well as hosted 2 open public forums. We have heard and truly and sincerely appreciate the feedback, and we have proactively amended our request from the original one to limit the events to 7,000 spectators or less, and also we recommended to include a sunset provision as a show of faith that we are intent to prove ourselves to our neighbors nearby. We simply want the chance to deliver on our commitment. Our hope is to bring another layer of cultural entertainment to this wonderful city of Evanston while generating incremental revenues to the city and the athletic department. Now, my colleague Dave Davis, the Executive Director of Neighborhood and Community Relations, is going to come and give a couple of additional comments. Thank you.
I'm sorry, did you state your name for the
I'm
record?
sorry, I don't think I did. My name is Mike Poliski. I'm the Deputy Athletic Director for Northwestern.
Thank you, Chairman, members of the Commission. My name again is Dave Davis, and I'm the Executive Director of Neighborhood and Community Relations for Northwestern University. And I don't want to be redundant, and in the interest of time, I just want to make a few comments. You'll hear tonight a lot of the concerns from the neighbors about sporting events, about what we're trying to do, and we've worked with the residents, and I just want to let you know that we will continue working with the residents to try to find a solution that makes everyone feel comfortable. We've been empathetic the entire time. We've listened. We've made changes to our proposal based on their suggestions, and we also understand that there may be a continuance tonight. So we would love to hear from the Commission your concerns, as well as our neighbors, which we've heard from loud and clearly over the past few months. So just wanted to say that. And also, as we move forward, we would respectfully request your favorable recommendation on this proposal. Thank you.
Okay. So again, are there any questions from the commissioners of the petitioner? Commissioner Goddard.
In reducing the number of persons that would attend these events, can that 7,000 be contained in the parking lots on Central Street?
We feel very confident that, first of all, with the intent of having concerts, the reality is we'll probably have a capacity at Walsh Ryan Arena of closer to 6,000, maybe even a touch less. A lot of it, and when we've had conversations with our neighbors, they've been frustrated, and I'm trying not to be coy at all. We just don't know exactly what's going to transpire based upon the act, but most acts will necessitate a stage and a whole bunch of seat kills. So the reality is it will probably be significantly less than 7,000, but we'll try and have as many people possible. We have 2,000 spots roughly between the east lot and the west lot. Most people who do drive to events come with several people, roughly at least another person. There's obviously ample public transportation. We have dedicated Uber and Lyft and other ride-sharing services available. And then we certainly hope a lot of people find their way just by walking. We have sold out basketball games consistently over the last decade where I've been there, and we have not had a lot of issues. Now, I will say one thing, and then the neighbors educated us on this. A lot of our fans, a lot of customers don't want to pay for parking. And what they want to do instead is they want to park in the neighborhood, which causes significant congestion. We have already expressed to our neighbors that we would be more than willing to open up the lots for free if that would potentially offset some of the congestion. They then educated us a little bit further that some people still won't do it because they want to be able to get out early and not wait for the egress of the lot. But we still think it's a potential benefit in that particular regard. And then one last comment. You talked about ticket tax and amusement tax. There is a difference, and I think I misspoke the last time I was with the neighbors, just simply because we've never really had an amusement tax before. We pay a ticket tax for all of our athletic events of 12%, and that is the largest ticket tax in the country. Our amusement tax, as it sits today, is structured at 4%. We are very happy to sit down and talk about amending that to make it more beneficial to the city.
Just tailing on to the parking, you provide shuttle services and remote parking for football events, et cetera. Would you be considering doing that also as part of the ability to provide for the ordinance parking for all the attendees within university property?
We certainly would be open to anything. We don't believe it will be an issue. As I said, with a lot of our sell-out for basketball, we haven't had that type of a concern from our patrons. Our neighbors might feel otherwise, and we'd be happy to try something out to see if that would alleviate the concern.
Commissioner.
So just to understand this and be clear, you're talking about additional events, right? In the calendar year, I don't know how many events you typically have, but with this change, there would be additional events. Because I think that's I haven't heard from the neighbors, but that might be one of the issues.
Well, it certainly is an issue, and yes, what we are requesting is the ability to have some additional events beyond what you currently saw there. We're trying to limit those events as we have reduced the number from our original proposal based upon the neighbors' concerns.
And how many additional events?
We asked for 6 additional events annually, plus 1 multi-event, which has been causing a little bit of confusion. Actually, the impetus was a National Tennis League had approached us well back, maybe it was in December of last year, asking if they can have a Chicago area team that would play 7 events during a league. So those would be 7 individual days where maybe we had 1,500 people that would come to Welsh Rhine Arena to watch a tennis tournament. And we're talking about pretty prominent names. That's what we were envisioning on a multi-event basis. We're also very comfortable in amending that to a particular number to make sure that everyone is comfortable with it. We're not looking at it as an opportunity to make a break here and turn something into a 20-day event series. It was just intended specifically for the World Tennis Team.
Do you have any data based on basketball games or other previous events on the economic impact on the neighborhood, maybe positively in terms of generation of income for local businesses?
I have some really rough numbers, and it's been kind of a little bit of a running joke that they don't understand. The neighbors are confused why I can't give them specifics. There's a big difference between Paul McCartney coming and Eddie Vedder coming, or if we have a up-and-coming country act as far as the amount of seats that we would sell and the tickets that we can charge. But just as an example, if we were to, and let's say we wanted to go out and we were able to secure, which I have no idea if we're going to be able to secure substantial types of acts initially. It might be a little bit of a process, but we obviously are only having 2 years to prove ourselves. But let's say Paul McCartney comes and we have 6,000 people that come in because that's the capacity with the stage and such. And the average ticket price is $100. So that's $600,000 that are coming in, and let's say that we agree on an amendment on the amusement tax, and for simplicity, we say it's 10%. So there's $60,000 that comes in just in that. Multiply that by 6 events, hopefully in a similar way, you're coming in close to $400,000. That's not including any ancillary events, ancillary taxes that we hope also is part of it, such as the liquor ability to sell within those events. And then finally, it's impossible to quantify the benefit to the city when you have some really good acts coming in. Hopefully we're bringing in thousands of people during the course of these shows that haven't been to Evanston before, and they enjoy some restaurants, and they maybe stay at the hotel, and they do a variety of other things. So some of that's very hard to determine.
Just for clarification, request for a liquor license, which I understand you don't currently have, is not part of this request.
That's correct.
Right, so that is not an issue for this body. All right. Commissioner Isaac.
Yeah. How many events are held at Ryan Field where you have, let's say, more than 2,000 attendees?
Just our football games currently. We had a really nice community picnic and movie night last Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think the number got there, but it was a nice number. And we have a meet the team night where the city is invited and it's open to the public to meet our football team leading into the season. We also had the Randy Walker Memorial 5K, which the race culminates there. Mm-hmm. We had 800 some participants this year. So it's really just our 7 football games.
Home games, 7?
7 home football games almost always, and on a rare occasion we will play one at Wrigley Field, and we have our next one at Wrigley Field in 2020. The previous one was 10 years earlier, 2010.
Okay, thank you.
So to translate that, this would double the amount of events that cannot be accommodated in the parking lot. If you said that there's 7, the only events that are above 2,000, which is the number in the parking lot, are football games, and there's 7 of those. Then if there are 6 more...
No, I'm sorry. He was referring to Ryan Field, not Welsh Ryan Arena. That was just for the Ryan Field events.
Right.
Welsh Ryan Arena, we have 18 basketball games that I think we averaged somewhere in the 6,000 range last year.
I see.
Yeah. So this ordinance is technically, I guess I'm going to ask staff this, is technically not discriminating between whether it's Welsh Ryan Arena or the stadium. It's just, it could be either venue, just so the participants are limited to 7,000.
Correct. So within the U2 district, so either the softball facility or baseball facility,
Right.
for example, as well.
Okay. Commissioner Dubin.
Has there been either the community or have you talked to anybody in our traffic department or parking about potential changes to the metering system around that area, particularly during football season? Has anybody brought that up with your alderman?
We actually have.
Okay.
We have a special event this year with Ohio State, and we have been meeting maybe every 4 to 5 weeks with representatives from the hospital, the NUPD, the fire department, the traffic control, the police department, emergency services, to make sure that we're doing what is appropriate to ensure the right ways of traffic flow.
But in particular, parking meters, because there's been some talk of changing
There is
parking meters.
Well, that's
near
a
the stadium.
city initiative. It's not a Northwestern initiative, and they actually initiated it a little bit last season for a touch. And I think there were some pros and cons to it, and the city made some amendments to it. But I do believe that it's in discussion again for them to do on some of the streets that are adjacent to Central Street.
So I guess that's something the neighborhood would keep on top of then, since it's a city issue. But Northwestern events would affect the parking in that area. Okay.
Commissioner Isaac.
Yeah, sorry, I'm doing this piecemeal here. How often are there more than one event, let's say, that has more than 500 attendees at the like athletic campus is what we'll call it, right? So you have baseball, softball, basketball, so Welsh Ryan and Ryan Field. how often are you having events, multiple events in one day? That's question number one. And then number two, is it contemplated that you would have with these other events, these temporary events, that you would have multiple events in one day?
Okay, let me try from the first. The first thing is from a football standpoint. Whenever we have a football game, we do not have additional events, or that's certainly has been our intent, because we just don't have the staffing to do it, and we don't have the bandwidth to do it, to have a football game at 2:30 and then a volleyball match that night. It just generally doesn't work, so we avoid that at all costs. So the answer is almost never. I can't recall one, but I can't say that it's never happened. As it relates to events in the area, we sometimes have double headers, if you will, at Welsh Ryan Arena, where we might have a women's basketball game at 1 o'clock and then maybe a wrestling meet later that day. Sometimes we've had a men's basketball game and a women's basketball game on the same day, but separated by a significant amount of hours. And again, it's generally a really controlled crowd. Our men's basketball program is the only one that generates a significant enough crowd to, in my opinion, be very concerned about making sure that the infrastructure is handled the right way and we handle the logistics. We will have a baseball game and a softball game at the same time, but there might be 150 people at the baseball game and 200 people at a softball game. So those things occasionally occur, but oftentimes there's very little additional traffic. And when you look at the attendance for most of our Olympic sports, they're pretty moderate.
So with the need for, let's say, setup for a concert, something that would have a high attendance, or hopefully a high attendance, you don't anticipate that you would be having another high attendance event in that same day?
No, that would be truly an impossibility based upon just the need for a setup and the speaker systems and all the infrastructure that goes into it. What would likely occur is that we may have an event. Let's say that we're going to have a Saturday concert at Welsh Ryan Arena. Maybe there's a Friday night event, and the moment that Friday night is done, then the place is broken down, and the crew changes it over to the concert, and then the concert takes place, and they have the sound check and all the things Saturday. So there is absolutely no way that there can be a second event until that concert's over.
Thank you.
Yeah.
One of the issues is parking in the neighborhood. Has Northwestern ever considered, and I realize there are other issues with this, but has Northwestern ever considered a parking garage on the parking lot that's to the west?
The answer is I'm not sure that the neighbors would like that.
I realize there are other issues.
Would we love to have additional parking? We would very much like to have additional parking. We've been fortunate enough to work with Canal Shores and the city in the most recent 5-6 years to find additional parking for our fans.
Because I know for these large events, they park in the neighborhood.
And they park on campus, and we do the shuttles, as was mentioned. We just haven't had a need to do shuttle service at all for basketball.
Okay. Commissioners, any other questions? All right. So at this point, I'll address the issue. There has been we read the standard for the for requests for continuance at the prior hearing. There was a request by mail that I should read the entire request, or just summarize it. Yeah. So that basically said that asked for consideration on requests for withdrawal showing that the person could not proceed with his or her evidence for the hearing at good cause. The good cause was presented as basically that it's August and people are on vacation. I have to consider this a kind of impossibility, or we would be shutting down the Evanston's procedures if that was a good cause. To go on vacation is not necessarily a good reason to say that you wouldn't requested the term, that's saying that, I'm sorry, I wasn't speaking into the mic. That's saying that you're on vacation is not a good cause to not be able to dispute the facts presented in the case. But I believe anyone else at this time could present a request for continuance. Okay.
Hi, my name is Judy Berg. I live at 2510 Jackson. I'm within 500 feet of the facility. And I hereby object to the applicant's presentation and formally request a sufficient continuation so we can prepare and present evidence to refute the testimony presented today.
All right, can I see the request? Okay, thank you. Is there any specific evidence that you're wishing, or all? All evidence. All right. Can you please have
We got several of them.
We got 3 days notice.
We'll go case by case then. So with the, does this meet the standard?
Chair Lewis, it may be beneficial for us to get them all.
Okay.
If one meets the standard,
All right.
we're just going to grant them all because
Okay.
that way this is,
Okay,
a
so-
one-time shot.
So why don't we go one by one? If you can please come up, sir.
All right, I'm Gary Cull of 2639 Eastwood. I'm right on the alley from the facilities, and I request also, because we've had less than 3 days' notice. In fact, I've never gotten notice, and so it's impossible for me to have prepared, or any of these other people to have prepared the type of presentation that these gentlemen have had for quite some time. They continue to amend their approaches. So my reasoning is because of a lack of notice and inability to prepare.
All right. Well, I believe we stated that the hearing meets the requirements for notice. You can give it to me and we'll pass it down. But I believe this is the same wording as the prior. Is everyone else who's presenting giving the same wording, the same document? All right, so there's no other, so the,
Yeah, he said ask for all of them. So.
it's going to be the same document, Mr. Yeah, so, all right.
And of course, it would be impossible in a 3-day period of time to refute some of the conclusions that staff has come to, apparently in a memo that they've disputed. So we have no choice but to ask for a continuance. And it would seem to me, under the rules, you should grant us.
All right.
I'm Laurie McFarland at 2720 Eastwood. And just for clarification, many of the neighbors here did not see the revised proposal from Northwestern because it was presented Monday night, I guess, at a community meeting. And at that point in time, they said they were still revising it. So many of the neighbors feel that they have specific pieces of evidence regarding property value, regarding the amount of the effect on businesses in the area. There are commercial as well as residential neighbors who want to speak to this, and they have been trying to figure out the parameters of the proposal right up until today. So that is the genesis behind these forms.
So can you please just write by hand on one of these what you just said, the specific items that you're going to refute, and then I think the standard will be met. All right, so, yeah, please.
I mean, in the meantime, we can continue with
Right.
taking questions from.
Yeah, so while you're doing that,
Chair Lewis, Yeah, quickly, just so everyone's focused on the rules and the law.
Yeah.
What your rule is under Article 13
Yes.
of the Plan Commission rules. It sets out the rules for persons or groups with ownership interests in property within 500 feet in the case of amendments, which is what we have here. In each direction of the subject property, inclusive of public roads, streets, alleys, and other public ways, who wish to object shall, upon request, be granted one continuance for the purpose of presenting evidence to rebut testimony.
So that's the
please do not put
specific
in there
nature.
that you do not have enough time. Please cite please indicate you would like to rebut testimony and indicate what
Yes,
that is.
yes, just,
The forms say to rebut testimony.
Right.
So
Okay, that's fine, but we just want to make sure we're all on the same page with what rule we're following. We're willing to receive all these, but we just want to make sure that everybody's on the same page with what rule is being applied.
Yes, we do understand that this is for the purpose of rebutting testimony that has been presented. And, you know, the standards to be applied here, there's some evidence that's been presented. There's also, frankly, sort of a lack of evidence on some points. And there's contrary evidence. And that all of that is, but it is all evidence oriented. Okay?
Okay, well,
So
that is the
That's-
lens if you're going to make a request that you need to do it.
Well, okay, it does say to present evidence. So I guess I'm not completely sure.
To present evidence in rebuttal.
Yes, it says to present
say
evidence to
rebut.
rebut testimony
It does
given.
say to rebut testimony.
Yeah.
So,
I believe we're on the same page. We
Okay.
just want to make sure that
all right.
there's
so-
a lot of these, and I just want to make sure the actual standard which we will be reviewing it was stated.
I'll finish writing this and get it to you.
So,
but-
yeah, so I was simply asking for more specificity on what would be rebutted, but it does not sound, is that required by the ordinance?
Well, Chair Lou, it's not in the ordinance, it's the rules. So
Yes,
just
the
so
rules,
we're
yes,
all
the
on,
rules,
on the
yes.
same page. I mean, to rebut something, to use that verb, you would usually identify what that is. I mean, but the way that they've been stated so far, I think you would be able to accept them if you so choose, but that is within the discretion of the commission.
Yeah. All right, so you'll have to come up. Yes, please, why don't you come up to the microphone? Please state it at the microphone, though.
I have one quick question.
Yeah.
You said that as it affects people who live within 500 feet, does that also mean people who live within 500 feet that live north of Isabella?
It does not distinguish Evanston residents and Wilmette residents.
So it's 500 feet wherever. Thank you. That's all I wanted to know.
Okay, thank you. All right, so why don't, if you can all give me your petitions, you don't have to come up and state it, why don't you just all give me the individual documents, if someone could possibly collect them, and we'll take them all. You should sign them, yes. Okay. Thank you, Warren. Okay, perfect. All right, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right, thank you. Oh, well, okay, we'll just take that one off to the side. I don't know if that's legal or not. Beautiful. So, thank you. All right. Excuse me? Yeah, so all of them, yeah, they're all the same, except two of them have additional statements on them. So which Ms. McFarland also by request. So yeah, I think so I'm procedurally I can grant this. Or do we have to make a motion? Make a motion? Okay. All right. Having collected. Okay. To ask questions tonight, right? Okay. All right. Two things. One, because of being respectful of your time, we can give you the opportunity to ask questions and to make comments tonight in lieu of the continued date. If you do make comments tonight, you will not be able to make comments or ask questions at the following meeting. So, do I? Yes. Yes, please come up. Please come up and.
Yes, okay, so that doesn't count. Okay, so
it doesn't count. Granted, it does not count as a question.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. So if we are we allowed, if this is continued, to ask them questions to what they presented here tonight?
No.
Next. You said
If you ask the question tonight, you
I'm
cannot.
not allowed, right?
To
But
do
if
it
I
next.
don't ask it tonight, can I ask it then?
Yes, of course. Yes. Yes. Right. Right. Exactly. Yes. Yes. Right. Right. Yes. What? Okay. Okay. So just so you know that August 28th will be the next meeting of the Plan Commission at 7 o'clock in the same venue. So.
Is it possible that we could be first on the docket?
I'll leave that up to staff.
On the back, you have September 11th.
The September 11th meeting is the standard regularly scheduled meeting. The August 28th would be a special meeting that's been planned that was basically just confirmed that we had a quorum for that. And that has happened from time to time where we do have additional meetings outside of the regular scheduled ones. It would be 7 o'clock in the same room here.
Same venue. All right. So does anyone want to speak tonight as opposed to? All right. I will come by a show of hands. So I think you raised your hand first. I'm assuming. Yeah, I think we let questions and comments just
I'll be really quick. I just want to point out there's some conflation.
Can you state your name?
Oh, yes, Lynn Troutman, 2635 Eastwood.
Lynn, I'm sorry. I need to make sure I have this recorded. So.
Okay. Last one.
At the end, last one. Lynn, okay, very good.
I just want to point out that there is conflating going on. As at the very beginning of the meeting, Megan Jones pointed out that the Bears played at the arena. They did not play at the arena. They obviously played at Ryan Field. But there's a lot of that conflating going on. Also, similarly, Paul McCartney would never play at a venue of 7,000 people. He played to an audience of 184,000 people. So are they talking about Ryan Field there? We don't know. They say not, but that's the question.
It's limited to 7,000 persons, whether it's at Ryan Field or
that would be an expensive ticket.
Yes,
None of us could afford it. As Commissioner Halleck pointed out, there was a request for an additional 6 to 7 events, but it should also be noted that it's 6 to 7 events of a very different nature. So they are asking for professional events, potentially with alcohol served, which is very different than what is happening now. It's not just another 6 to 7 events. It's potentially very different. So my question genuinely is, why, if they are talking about 6 to 7 events per year at the indoor arena, why must we rezone Ryan Field?
It's not being rezoned.
Well, it is. It's on the map, and it's
a text amendment. It's not a rezoning. It is U2. It is staying U2. It's staying U2. It's not being rezoned. It is exactly what it
we're talking about making changes. I guess this really applies to the alcohol concern too. If we're going to serve alcohol, they say there's no interest in that, but if Paul McCartney played at the stadium, would they want to serve beer? Probably. Anyway, I just want to point out, and I think it's important, there's a lot of conflating going on, and the arena is a very different venue than Ryan Field, and I think it's important to separate them and separate the rules and clarify what rules apply to which venue. Otherwise, because obviously we don't want the risk of changing the rules for the arena and then suddenly have that, oh, it's applied to the stadium too. So that's my.
Okay.
There we go. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you. You were second, at least second that I saw.
On there, first page.
Mark Sloan, got it.
Got it.
Thank you.
Couple quick questions and then a comment, or a comment and a couple quick questions. I am president of Central Street Neighbors Association and volunteered to help maybe even mitigate this scenario with the neighbors in Northwestern. So we're hopefully going to help get involved with, hopefully, the alderman who should be here saying what are the neighbors' concerns, what is the Northwestern's issues, and trying to come up with a solution to this problem rather than the neighbors in Northwestern just constantly butting heads against each other. So that's the first question. You did receive my email. I was on a commission like yours for 10 years here in the city. We never took action in August on something that had such effect on the neighbors because we knew a ton of parents and a ton of families were out on vacation. So I understand what you're saying. You would never get work done, but I disagree. We would never take this kind of action. And that's kind of been the concern of some of the neighbors is that, oh, it's getting pushed through when nobody's around. So let's make that clear on my email. 3 questions. This specific new adjustment does not specifically say only Welsh Ryan Arena. We could have 7,000 people in the field and have an event there and have a concert there with only 7,000 tickets sold. So we need to understand as neighbors that it's not just specifically Welsh Ryan, it is Ryan Field as well. So this does not specifically, and it goes in difference to what was said Monday night, that it was only going to be Welsh Ryan Arena. This says any U2, we could have 7,000 people on the baseball field as well, holding an event. So let's make sure we're all clear. And I agree with you, we're all clear that it could be anywhere in the U2 area. So let's make sure that we're clear on that. Couple quick questions. The City Special Events Committee, is that a City Council committee? Is that a staff committee? Is it a mixture of both? Does anybody know?
That is a staff committee.
Okay.
That is set up to review some of the larger events that may be occurring on city property or are recurring and may need some of the city
so it's staff,
resources.
Not elected officials.
No.
Gotcha. And then on the the proposed amendment that which the multi-day event would be require special permission from the city of Evanston. Is that again from staff or elected officials? Based on how it's written, I don't know.
Yeah, admittedly, it is a bit ambiguous. I guess depending on the event, it could be something that is, if it's something that's of a greater concern, we could have the council be the review for that, or with the special events committee. I would probably leave that up to the commission to decide which one would be the better body to make that consideration.
Okay.
Chair Lewis, can I clarify something?
Yes, please.
Sure. So the city currently approves some special events is actually a term of art right now, and it's defined as all outdoor events requested on city property, i.e. street, sidewalk, park, and/or deemed to significantly impact the city, are considered special events. An event that requires city council approval is a special event. So if city council does approve many special events, for instance, the Out of Space concert that goes on at Canal Shores, that was one of the special events that was approved by city council. When we come back from our continuance, I can have the list of the ordinance that included the previous list, and maybe we can include that packet to give it some context.
Okay.
And provide some more information on this topic.
But you're stating that the special events permit would be approved by city council and not a staff.
There is a way to make it a city council approved event. Since this event doesn't currently exist in Evanston, I don't think it's currently contemplated under that section, but that doesn't mean that the Plan Commission couldn't make that recommendation.
Okay.
The other question is, the 6 single-day events don't need permission from anybody, the way it's written, right? It's just the multi-day event that needs permission from the city of Evanston. So those 6 events, as long as they fit some of the other stuff, doesn't need any permission from anybody. Is that correct?
The way that is written, that is basically the case. Again, if that's something that the commission wants to look at, to have some additional review or oversight, that is something that can be considered.
And then my last question is, currently they are allowed to have 7 events. So this isn't adding 7 new events. Currently they are allowed to have 7 events. They are events that have to be of a nonprofit nature and amateur athletic events. So we're not adding 7 more events. We're just changing the 7 events that they, by code, already have the ability for. How is it adding? How is it adding if it's in the code?
What is really changing is the nature of
the 7 events. They already have
as
permission
the code
to
is
do.
written, they have permission
Right.
to
Just want to
hold
clarify
special events that are of a nonprofit or amateur athletic event nature.
So Commissioner Halleck's question is, he said they're adding 7 more events, and I wanted to clarify that it's not adding 7 more events, it's just changing the nature of the 7 events that they've already have by code permission to use.
Essentially.
Yeah.
All right, thank you very much.
And just to go, and also they have permission to have multi-day events at all 7 events currently.
Correct.
Right? So this is diminishing the amount of multi-day events that they're requesting. This is saying 6 single-day events and 1 multi-day event versus 7 multi-day events. So,
Right. Which cannot exceed 5 days.
Exactly. So this is a significant lessening of the amount of days. That's what the proposal is saying. So.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Yes.
Excuse me. Everyone's going to have an opportunity to speak.
So,
okay.
So if you would,
everyone's going to have an opportunity.
Are you raising your hand to have questions? Yes, please. Yeah.
My name's Andy Berman. I live at 1711 Chancellor. I've lived in Evanston for 28 years, near the stadium. Because you've scheduled this in August, when, as the gentleman said, it's ridiculous for something of this great import when people are on vacation. I planned a vacation 6 months ago. We're going to be leaving on the 28th, so I've got to speak now. I have some questions I'd like to ask the presenters. based upon what was just brought out, how many events have you put on under the existing code, which allows you 7 events that you have to get permission to go to city council for in the last 10 years?
Yes, please, yes. Are you asking multiple questions or
Yes,
just?
I have several questions.
So can you please ask all the questions,
I'm
and then we'll
sorry.
have him
Okay,
come up
all
and
right.
just.
I
just for the-
apologize. I
yes.
should have known from what you were saying.
Yeah.
So, let me get the question I have here. Okay, the other question I have is to ask the applicants is, did they, why are they, if this is all about Welsh Ryan Arena, why didn't they just say Welsh Ryan Arena in the application instead of the number 7,000? And the second question is did you consult an attorney from Northwestern when you made that decision not to name Welsh Ryan Arena as the venue instead of putting it as under 7,000 people, which we all know is Welsh Ryan Arena and not Dyke Stadium, which I still call it because, you know, those of us who've lived here for a long time still think of it as Dyke Stadium. So those are the 2 questions I have for the applicants.
Okay, thank you. So,
Chairman Lewis, discussing someone's consultations with an attorney is not an appropriate question.
all right, so you don't.
But they can answer why they're not doing, why they're not just saying Welsh Ryan Arena instead of this more than 7,000.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
I'll just answer the first question. We generally have had maybe one additional event. We had, in fact, Carly Rae Jepsen. For those of you who know who she is, she played a concert November 16th of 2018, a couple of days after the opening of the newly constructed Welsh Ryan Arena. And that was a student-run concert. So the students have had a concert there generally once a year or so. And I'm not trying to cause problems, but I just want to make one quick comment about the Paul McCartney comment. In June of 2018, Paul McCartney is planning to do some small venue shows, loves the intimacy of it and a variety of other things as opposed to playing in front of 40 or 50,000 people. So I just, you know, we just want to stay with just facts and be reasonable. So I'm going to let Dave answer the second question.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioners. So again, the question, if I understand, is why we listed 7,000 as the capacity instead of specifically saying Welsh Ryan Arena and identifying one of our facilities. Now, there's no nefarious reason behind doing that. After reading the ordinance, we felt that was more consistent with the language and that it made more sense to list 7,000 instead of identifying a specific facility because we didn't know what other unintended consequences that could cause. And so it's simply, that's the reason. Again, there's, you know, I'm not sure I understand why there's a concern. Well, I do understand, but, you know, I think the notion here is that we're trying to do something, again, nefarious, and that's not the intent at all. We just thought that would be more consistent with the language in the ordinance.
Would you be open to modifying the language to make a temporary event an indoor event?
Sure. I mean, we're open to a lot of things. And, you know, that's why we've been talking to the neighbors for the past, you know, 4 months now. And so we've had 2 public events, and we'll continue to talk to the neighbors. I mean, that's why we're here. We would love to get recommendations from the commission as well as continue to work with the residents.
Dave is a really nice guy, and they have been meeting with us. And I just want, you know, this is not personal, but just a couple.
That's on camera.
Right. But just the reason I asked those questions is, one, because of the chairman, you were suggesting that they're not actually adding any events, they're subtracting them. Well, they essentially don't put on any events under the existing code. They just said that, you know, like one a year maybe. And as far as I know, I don't remember
But
seeing.
their right to.
Their
is
right to,
being
but that's
diminished.
different. The
Yes,
right to
yes.
is different than when all of a sudden, because it's always all about the money, and this is clearly all about the money too. They just spent a fortune fixing this place up, and now they want to monetize it. And the reason why they haven't put on any events in the past with 7,000 people is because it was not going to be about the money, since they were not profit by definition. So, and the reason I asked about why they're not naming, and you proposed saying indoors. without getting into the map text controversy, there may be legal consequences as to naming a specific building in the district, and that's why I'm convinced it's not Welsh Ryan Arena, but they came up with this. So we think it's de facto a map amendment. You seem to disagree, but, we'll agree to disagree. But anyway, I think to say that they're or cutting back on the number of events is just not accurate, and that's why I wanted to make sure that they told you exactly how many they'd put on under the existing amount. Thank you.
Okay, good. So who else would like to speak tonight? I am going to limit comments in duration, please. So, no. No, well, the questions are questions, but is this a procedural question?
No, it's a question about the August 28th meeting, but you're saying there's an August 28th, but I thought that in the city, that you have to have it published 2 days ahead that you have a meeting. And this was not published in the city.
So according to the rules, notice has been given for this meeting, and that satisfies the notice requirements. So the next one is a continuance of this meeting. So it's already been noticed. It's already been noticed. Correct me if I'm wrong, please. So, okay? All right. So, yeah.
Hi, Matthew Grayson. I'm on the list there, maybe a dozen down,
Okay.
2648 Asbury.
Okay.
So I was just curious whether, if these are professional events, is there any anticipated income from, say, televised rights or anything like this that's anticipated by the organizers that would produce additional income? And is there any thoughts that there might be also revenue generated for the city of Evanston for such rights? And the other question I had is, if there are, as was mentioned, 6 single-day events that do not require any further coordination with the city, is there going to be any effort to make sure that those events do not conflict with other regular Evanston events, so that there's not a conflict of community and professional events? Those were my questions.
Okay, thank you. Please.
Thank you for the question. As it relates to television rights and some other ancillary revenue streams, I really don't know. I guess a lot of it would have to do with the type of event we would have. In my recollection, it's incredibly rare to see a concert that is actually then broadcast for rights, and if those rights would generally remain with the performer and the artist. But we would certainly be comfortable in talking about some sort of a revenue share if there were additional revenues that were not just the basic revenues that we're expecting, which would be through consumption, through concessions, as well as ticketing. As it relates to avoiding other significant Evanston events, we certainly would endeavor to do so. We try to do that as consistently as possible. We don't always have the ability to pick and choose, as you can imagine, with our 19 programs and the 6 programs that play at Welsh Ryan Arena, and football and the broadcast that goes behind it. We're told most of the time when our events are. So if we're told when most of our events are, there are going to be very few windows where there's going to be open Friday or Thursday or Saturday, but we would endeavor to do so. For instance, I'm not missing the mashup no matter what, because I go to it every year. It's my favorite event. So we'll do what we can as it relates to that.
Okay, other people who would like to speak tonight? It's Evanston. Yeah, you can speak. Yeah, have you signed up? Well, I just have you sign afterward if you would like to speak tonight and not at the continued. Okay, please.
My name is Joyce Forsbicki. I'm at 900 Greenwood Street, Evanston, Illinois. Sorry, the speech disorder. I'd like to know, of these events, are they having besides liquor, are they hosting their own type of food? I actually go out to New Orleans Jazz Fest. The French Quarter is, no one goes, then gets flooded when the people come back from the fest. So for someone to say that we're going to bring money to your city, a lot of the business owners don't see it. So they go out to the event. It stays solely at the event. So will there be any food sold within these events, or will our city benefit our restaurants, small business owners? And thank you.
We will sell concessions at all of the events, just like we currently do with football and all the events at Welsh Ryan Arena. We do believe, based upon the feedback that we receive from a lot of our local businesses, that there's still some nice patronage, because a lot of our consumers don't want to spend the money on a hot dog or a thing of nachos. They'd rather enjoy a nice meal at one of the great restaurants in Evanston.
Okay.
Andrea Versini, 2647 Eastwood. Our property abuts the western parking lot. And my question is, I noticed, woo, this moves. I noticed that there are mentions of lighting and tractor trailers, but I'm wondering if there are any other stipulations or restrictions on setting up, taking down, cleaning, because it's not at all unusual for noise to begin at 6 a.m. and go well past 11 p.m. So I was just wondering if there were any city rules or Northwestern restrictions on that.
We always abide by the 11 o'clock noise ordinance at our place as it relates to where trucks and other necessary vehicles would go. We're really pleased that we have had, as part of the renovation, we have carved out a big area on the northern part of the plot, north of the softball stadium and adjacent to the outfield of the baseball stadium, a whole bunch of additional parking spaces and other areas where we can store things, which will take away from the congestion that has occasionally occurred. As far as the timing of things, we, just like the previous situation with the YWCA, we would certainly be comfortable in talking to anyone who was going to be conducting business to make sure they do it at the appropriate time to not disrupt the neighbors.
I'm not talking about trucks or business. I'm talking about the fact that from my bedroom I can hear what goes on in Welsh Ryan, or after football games, the morning after, I hear like bang, 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 bang. I don't know whether it's bleachers being set up or taken down. It's not outside people coming in. It's interior noises that are very loud in the neighborhood.
Inside of Welsh Ryan Arena?
Yes.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. I mean, I can understand football for sure, but
yeah, and sorry. Well, I will also, and you know, if we're talking about, it could also be an exterior event, and it's 7,000 people on the football field. Again, if it's an evening event, the next morning, you guys are out there cleaning, doing I don't know what. I can't identify the noises, or your trucks are going inside the stadium property, and it's really loud, and it starts very early, or the parking people come out at 6 a.m. to start setting up so that the tailgaters can come at 7 a.m. So, you know,
yeah,
it's a long day.
I understand. I won't be able to assist too much other than asking them to be as quiet as possible as it relates to tailgating and the timing of that, to make sure that they're appropriately securing the parking lots and such. But we certainly can talk about the appropriate time for them to do cleanup following an event that ends at night. The irony is that the intent is to clean it up as well as possible, as quickly as possible, so that we don't disrupt the neighborhood. But your point's a really good one, and we can certainly ask people to wait until 8 o'clock or a particular time that is better. Yes, thanks.
So, and I believe there is a city noise ordinance that starts at some point in the morning also. So I'm not sure what that is, but
you know what? I'm not sure what that is either. I know it's 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah. Okay. 7 a.m. Yeah.
Yeah.
But a noise ordinance is a noise ordinance, right? Whoever makes the noise. So, yeah, whether you're mowing your lawn or whatever. So, all right. All right. How, anyone else, and by the way, can you pass the, anyone else who wishes to speak tonight? All right. We have received petitions for continuance. Is there a motion to continue this meeting to the date certain of August 28th, 2009? What? 2019. 19. I'm sorry, I'm 10 years out of date.
So moved.
Commissioner Isaac. Seconded? Anyone?
Second.
Commissioner Goddard. You have to be quick. So, so does this require a roll call or a voice vote? Voice vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All against? Having heard none, this case is continued until August 28th. Thank you.
Wait, was it?
This? Well, yeah, so is there a I'm sorry. The meeting's not over with yet. Is there a motion to adjourn the meeting? Seconded, reverse, Goddard, Isaac. All in favor? Aye. All against? Here none. This meeting is adjourned.